Chapter 674. Li Xiaotian was good at using bows and arrows, which was also why she had always coveted the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows. At this moment, the arrow in her hand was not a shooting sun arrow. She only had one shooting sun arrow, and unless she had no other choice, she would definitely not use this divine armament. Wang! With a release of his finger, the arrow flew out. The surging airflow stirred up the air in all directions, causing the bamboo leaves to rustle non-stop. Ding! With a crisp sound, the arrow hit a green bamboo. However, a strange scene happened. The green bamboo was undamaged. It was only bent in a large arc by the force of the bow and arrow. Then, it quickly bounced back, still piercing through the sky. Li Xiaotian's pupils constricted as he looked at this scene in disbelief. This was just a green bamboo, how could it block such a powerful arrow attack? There must be a demon when things are abnormal. She felt more and more that this sword forest was strange. Not only did it block her path and confuse her direction, even this kind of attack was unable to harm the green bamboo in the slightest. She gradually began to believe the legends about the sword forest. There really was some kind of mysterious power that could not be explained clearly. A small country like this actually has such a magical place. It's strange. Li Xiaotian shook her head. She was very puzzled. So what if it's magical? I don't believe that a living person like me will be trapped in this bamboo forest to death. Li Xiaotian's prideful nature erupted. How could she admit defeat to the bamboo forest? Wouldn't that make people laugh their heads off? Thus, she took a deep breath and pulled the bowstring again. Waves of inner strength passed through her arm and into the bowstring. The bowstring was pulled into a full moon, and the arrowhead shone with a cold light under the moonlight. Swoosh! The arrow left the line, and the air seemed to be torn apart, producing a sharp sound of breaking through the air. Boom! A green bamboo was hit once again, and the berserk force directly pressed it to the ground. I think you're still going on like this. Li Xiaotian's eyes revealed a trace of complacency. However, in the next second, her face froze. Her eyes were wide open as she stared straight at the green bamboo. The bamboo that had fallen to the ground just now bounced back, as if nothing had happened. It was still proud and straight. This. Li Xiaotian was dumbfounded. He had never seen or heard of such a situation before. Was this still an ordinary green bamboo? She quickly stroked the bamboo pole beside her, but there was nothing strange. Wasn't this just ordinary bamboo? But since when did bamboo have such a strong ability to withstand attacks? What the devil, what the devil? She couldn't help but exclaim. She looked up at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. Although she was very unwilling, she had to admit that she was trapped in this forest of swords. Inside the wooden hut, the Imperial Preceptor and Junko were talking. The Imperial Preceptor was still hidden in the darkness, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. However, his thin and small body made people feel an inexplicable pressure. Junko had long since gotten used to this kind of aura and pressure. She even felt a sense of familiarity. The two of them chatted as time slowly passed. Junko spent most of her time listening and comprehending the Imperial Preceptor's profound meaning and instructions. When the Imperial Preceptor finally stopped, Junko asked, "Imperial Preceptor, are we really going to do this? Those people are imprisoned, and even I can't release them. Therefore, this matter is no longer under my control. This is the only feasible way." The Imperial Preceptor said somewhat vexedly. Although Junko was surprised that the Imperial Preceptor said that even he couldn't control this matter, she didn't ask further. Since the Imperial Preceptor didn't say anything, she naturally wouldn't ask. This was a habit cultivated over many years. However, she still frowned and said worriedly, "But if we do this, then this matter will really blow up and we might even suffer heavy losses." There will be losses in everything. We just have to think of a way to remedy it. The Imperial Preceptor said disapprovingly. Junko wanted to say something but hesitated. But in the end, she swallowed her words. Since the Imperial Preceptor had already made a decision, then she should wholeheartedly carry it out. There was no room for negotiation. Yes, Junko understands. Junko nodded in acknowledgement. Suddenly, the Imperial Preceptor exclaimed in surprise. His voice became somewhat cold. Someone has broken into the Forest of Swords. Who is so bold? Junko glared and flew into a rage. The Forest of Swords was an important place in the Imperial Preceptor's residence. For so many years, no one had ever dared to trespass into the Forest of Swords. Suddenly, her heart stirred as she remembered that familiar face. She said angrily, "Is it Li Xiaotian?" The Imperial Preceptor said calmly, "It's most likely her. Go and bring her out, otherwise she will definitely be trapped in the Forest of Swords." Serves her right. She only has herself to blame. Junko said with a murderous look. Bring her out. The Imperial Preceptor repeated. Junko's angry words were immediately swallowed back. The Imperial Preceptor had already repeated the order. If she dared to talk nonsense, then the consequences would be very serious. Junko left the cabin, leaving the Imperial Preceptor alone. He quietly hid in the darkness and muttered to himself. Li Palace, I'm afraid you didn't expect to send me such a big gift like Tangjing. As long as I have him, many of Hua Xiao's long-lost techniques will be able to see the light of day again. As long as I learn these techniques, I will be able to perfect my ninjutsu and bring it to a new peak. Completely surpassing Hua Xiao's techniques will be just around the corner. At that time, the empire will rise again in the forest of the world. Hua Xia and other countries will crawl under our feet, allowing the empire to complete the unfinished business of our ancestors. His words gradually revealed a sense of madness. It made people tremble in fear. Li Xiaotian had already used all of her skills, but she still couldn't break out of this Forest of Swords. Her martial arts were like scratching an itch, unable to hurt the slightest bit of the Forest of Swords. Could it be that they really want to force me to use the shooting sun arrows? She touched the shooting sun arrows that she always carried on her back. The shooting sun arrows were divine weapons. They couldn't be easily shown to others, so as to avoid attracting the disaster of killing monks. But now that she was trapped in this damned forest, she was so angry that she was ready to use the shooting sun arrows. She didn't believe that these cabinets could withstand the power of the shooting sun arrows. It must be known that the shooting sun arrows were used to shoot down the sun. Just as she was about to make up her mind, a person's figure became clear under the moonlight. It gradually approached and finally arrived in front of Li Xiaotian. Junko looked at Li Xiaotian with an unkind expression and said coldly, "You trespassed into the Forest of Swords. That is a capital offense." Li Xiaotian was unmoved and said indifferently, "Then are you here to kill me?" "Humph, the state teacher is merciful and has given you a way out. If you dare to run amok again, then I guarantee you will regret it." Junko's killing intent soared. With her temper, she really wanted to kill Li Xiaotian on the spot. But she didn't dare to disobey the state teacher's orders. Li Xiaotian shrugged and smiled indifferently. She strode in the direction Junko came from and left the Forest of Swords in a short while. Junko followed behind her step by step, monitoring her and preventing her from causing any trouble. Li Xiaotian quietly returned to her room. Junko stood outside for a long time before turning around and leaving. Li Xiaotian lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling with her eyes wide open. Hundreds of thoughts ran through her mind. The state teacher's residence is more mysterious than I expected. Especially in the Forest of Swords, the strangeness and mystery is far beyond my imagination. I must get to the bottom of it. These years, although the island nation and Hua Xia coexisted peacefully, a dog can't stop itself from eating shit. This is a truth that has been proven for thousands of years. If the island nation continues to grow stronger, they will definitely rise again and stir up more storms. Li Xiaotian's understanding was clear and deep. She didn't really treat the state teacher's residents as a little sheep just because of their temporary close relationship. The island nation was like a poisonous snake, always waiting for an opportunity to strike. As long as the other party was given the chance, they would take a fatal bite. After returning to the Li Palace this time, I must ask the palace master about this matter. The cooperation between the Li Palace and the state teacher's residence puzzled Li Xiaotian and even made her somewhat dissatisfied. Her thoughts were more flexible than Junko's. Although the palace master didn't tell her the truth, she still wanted to know the ins and outs of the matter. The next day, Junko left the state teacher's residence alone, but she didn't notice that Li Xiaotian was following her from a distance. Li Xiaotian was good at hiding her tracks, so she followed from a distance to find out where Junko was going. Based on her intuition, she was sure that Junko was going on some secret operation. She had been in the state teacher's residence for a few days, but she had been doing nothing and making no progress. This made her very frightened and dissatisfied. Back then, the palace master only told her to act according to the circumstances and didn't give her any specific arrangements. Her operation this time was more like an experience. Li Xiaotian wasn't someone who spent her days muddling along. Since she was here, she naturally had to get to the bottom of everything. Junko was as fast as a shooting star. It didn't take long for her to arrive at the place where she and Tang Jing had agreed to meet yesterday. Looking up, there was no one around. Did he go back on his words? Junko frowned. Why would I go back on my words? A voice suddenly rang in Junko's ears. She was startled and subconsciously jumped to the side, staring at him like a tiger watching its prey. She didn't know how he could appear and disappear so mysteriously. Did you bring the information I asked for? Tang Jing asked. Junko's expression was stern. I have to see the emperor first before I can tell you the information. Hee, are you afraid that I'll lie to you? One must always be on guard against others. These are the rules of the game that I set. You have no right to bargain. Tang Jing slightly frowned and said with dissatisfaction. Then there's nothing to talk about. Junko's attitude was very firm. If I can't see the emperor, then there's nothing to talk about. You're not afraid that I'll kill him? Tang Jing said fiercely. Don't scare me. If you kill him, then you won't know anything about those people. Junko joked. Tang Jing's eyelids twitched. If that was the case, then she really did know about Wu Junshan and the others. Compared to the Mikado, he cared more about the safety of these people. Obviously, Junko was also very clear about this, so she refused to let it go. Fine, then I'll let you see the emperor. If you dare to lie to me, then I'll immediately behead him. Tang Jing said decisively. Chapter 675. Tang Jing gestured towards the distance, and two figures walked out from behind an obstacle. It was the martial emperor and the heavenly emperor. The heavenly emperor was in a sorry state, but when he saw Junko, his expression immediately became excited. However, he was tightly controlled by the martial emperor and could not escape at all. He could only watch from afar. The two of them did not approach, but deliberately maintained a certain distance. Junko's eyes revealed a strange look, and said, "Let them come closer." The corner of Tang Jing's mouth curled, and he sneered, "You want to save the heavenly emperor, right? Stop dreaming, just looking from afar is enough. If you dare to push your luck, then there's nothing to talk about." How could Tang Jing be led by the nose by the other party, and gradually took the initiative? Junko's expression changed, and she finally gritted her teeth and said, "All right, then listen carefully, the source of the news on the island is Li Palace." Li Palace. Tang Jing's pupils suddenly constricted. Although Li Xiaotian's appearance had already made him guess, when he personally confirmed it, he was still very shocked. Li Xiaotian was hiding far away, and could vaguely hear the conversation between the two. When she heard that Junko did not hesitate to sell out Li Palace, she was furious, and her eyes were about to spit fire. Li Xiaotian gritted her teeth in hatred. This girl from the island nation was indeed not a trustworthy person, to sell out Li Palace so cleanly. But she did not think about how she had sold out Tang Jing back then, and almost took his life. It was truly a case of the pot calling the kettle black. As expected, it was Li Palace's doing. Li Palace's intelligence network is spread all over the world, and it is not a boast. Even this vast island could not escape their investigation. But why did they tell you this news? Because that island is closer to our country. Also, Li Palace is very clear that we have the strength to deal with those people. You have the strength. Humph, don't lie, those people are not weak people. What qualifications do you have to say that you can deal with them? Tang Jing did not agree, because he was very clear about the strength of Wu Junshan and the rest. Junko smiled calmly and said, "Isn't the truth the best evidence?" Tang Jing was speechless. After a while, he asked, "What did you do to them?" "Of course it's locked up." Tang Jing was overjoyed. Since Wu Junshan and the others were not dead, it was not too late. "Where is it?" "Of course it's a very secret place. Without my guidance, outsiders wouldn't be able to find it even if they dug 3 feet into the ground," Junko said confidently. Tang Jing glared at him. "Then aren't you afraid that I'll kill the Heavenly Emperor?" "Of course I am. So, let's make a deal. You give me the Emperor, and I'll tell you the location." "That's too unfair. I haven't even seen him, and I'm handing the Emperor over to you. Do you really think I'm a 3-year-old child, so easy to fool?" Tang Jing said angrily. Junko hesitated for a moment, then said, "All right, I can hand him over to you, but you have to let the Emperor come over. I want to check if he's injured. If you did something to him, then there's no need to talk about it." Tang Jing hesitated. Just what kind of trick was this Junko playing? As if she had seen through Tang Jing's thoughts, Junko laughed mockingly. "Your cultivation is higher than mine. Don't tell me you're afraid of me." Tang Jing's heart moved. The other party's strength was not as good as his. Even if he brought the Emperor over for her to check, she wouldn't be able to play any tricks, let alone take him away from under his nose. "All right, if the Emperor is fine, then you have to use those people to exchange for the Emperor." Tang Jing agreed. Junko smiled, tacitly agreeing to his suggestion. Tang Jing waved his hand, and Marshall walked over with the Emperor. "Is there any news?" After walking closer, Marshall asked impatiently. Tang Jing nodded, indicating for her to calm down, and said to Junko, "Check." Junko smiled in satisfaction. She extended her hand and touched the Emperor's body, as though she wanted to check if there was anything wrong with his body. Tang Jing and Marshall were both cold. They looked at Junko without saying a word. Suddenly, the Emperor's face changed. He let out a heart-wrenching scream. "What are you doing?" Before he finished, Junko had already retreated. An autumn water-like sword appeared in her hand. The sword tip was still stained with blood, dripping to the ground. Junko's eyes released a biting cold killing intent. She coldly looked at the sinister-looking Emperor. The others were dumbstruck at this scene. Tang Jing, Marshall, and even Li Xiaotian, who was hiding in the shadows, all had their mouths wide open, to the point where a duck egg could be stuffed in. Damn, what the hell is going on? Why would Junko want to kill the Emperor? This world is too messed up. The 3 of their brains were not enough. Even if they were smart, they could not figure out what was going on. Blood flowed out from the Emperor's throat. His face was distorted from the pain, as though he was an evil spirit that crawled out from hell. You. So ruthless. The Emperor stretched out his finger, trembling as he pointed at Junko, gasping for breath. he spoke intermittently. "You can't die." Tang Jing shouted. He immediately supported the emperor, his fingers quickly poking his body, trying to save his life. But after a while, he realized that it was all in vain. The emperor's heart had already been pierced through by the sword, his life was cut off, there was no way to save him. "Why did you kill him? Isn't he your heavenly emperor?" Tang Jing roared hysterically at Junko. Without the emperor as a hostage, the whereabouts of Wu Junshan and the rest would be impossible to investigate. The other party had spent so much effort, even sacrificing the emperor, so that they would not let Tang Jing know of this news. It could be said that they had put in a lot of effort. Hearing this, Junko was unmoved. She smiled faintly and said, "How can you guess the imperial advisor's decision?" Marshall was unable to restrain his anger. He roared, "Without the emperor, I will take you as a hostage." With that said, she disappeared from where she was and attacked Junko. Junko's left hand formed a seal, her right hand holding the sword, her hand seals flew, the autumn water sword was immediately filled with a mysterious sword chi. Wang! Her arms suddenly shook, the autumn water sword vibrated, waves of sword chi shot out from the autumn water sword, shooting towards Marshall. Marshall's face changed. When an expert made a move, one would know whether or not it was real. She had already determined that the opponent's sword technique was definitely not simple. Thus, she bellowed, her right hand formed a blade, and waves of blazing chi surged out from her palm. She swung it fiercely. Boom! When the sword chi was hit by the roaring flame blade, it was like a surging river meeting a stone, with Marshall's palm as the origin, the sword chi flew to both sides. The surrounding trees and flowers were all hit by the sword chi, turning into ruins. It was a complete mess. "Humph, you think you can beat me like this?" Junko sneered and swung the autumn water sword. 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4. In the end, 16 autumn water swords were formed. "Kill!" Junko shouted. The 16 autumn water swords shot towards Marshall with the sound of wind and thunder. All 3 paths were blocked by the autumn water swords. Marshall's face sank. The opponent's cultivation was high beyond her expectations. She could not accurately judge Junko's cultivation, but she was sure that she was in the Xiantian realm. From the opponent's series of attacks, it could be determined that her cultivation was not inferior to Marshall's. Seeing this, Tang Jing was deeply shocked. When he fought with Junko yesterday, Junko's strength was far from this. This meant that her cultivation had increased by leaps and bounds overnight. Tang Jing's eyelids twitched. The people of the imperial tutor's residence actually had such a foundation. In just one night, their cultivation could change so drastically. It seemed that the imperial tutor's residence was far more powerful than he had imagined. Seeing the autumn water swords coming at her, Marshall jumped into the air, dodging the attacks from the middle and lower paths, but the autumn water sword at the top continued to stab forward. Clang! Clang! Marshall used her hand as a blade. Flames rose into the air crackled, the roaring flame blade danced in the air, fiercely clashing with the autumn water swords. Boom! With a loud sound, the autumn water swords were annihilated, leaving only one behind, while Marshall flew back several meters before coming to a stop. Junko held her sword with one hand and stood proudly, looking at Marshall with sparks in their eyes. In this exchange, both sides were evenly matched. The one with the most complicated feelings was not the person involved, but Li Xiaotian, who was hiding in the dark. Her cultivation was on the same level as Marshall in the past, but ever since Marshall and Tang Jing came together, they had mysteriously suppressed her. Now, even an island nation girl's cultivation was higher than hers. She really wanted to find a piece of tofu and kill herself. Her heart was fiercely hit. She had always been good at scheming, but now she realized that she was simply neglecting the essentials and chasing after the trifles. Even something as fundamental as martial arts had been abandoned. She looked from afar with a complicated expression, biting her lips, all sorts of feelings welling up in her heart. At this time, Tang Jing realized that the emperor's head was tilted to one side. He had completely lost his life. His mood could not help but become gloomy. Junko, since the emperor is dead, then you will have to replace him as a hostage. With that, his feet flashed, and he appeared in front of Junko, stretching out his hand and grabbing towards her shoulder. Junko quickly retreated, leaving a long trail on the ground. Tang Jing was like a shadow, his finger getting closer and closer. So. The autumn water sword danced in the air. It was like a waterfall flying through the air, stirring towards Tang Jing's finger. Ding! Tang Jing flicked his finger, and the autumn water sword was knocked away, his 5 fingers moving together, about to grab the opponent. But the autumn water sword welcomed it. It was like an unkillable cockroach. Tang Jing snorted, his hand turned into a fist, and heavily smashed down. Pang! With a muffled sound, the fist fiercely landed on the autumn water sword, the sword chi rippled, and Junko turned into a shooting star, flying backwards. Tang Jing's speed was even faster. Before she landed, he was already standing below her, ready to capture her alive. Junko was in mid-air, looking at Tang Jing below. She did not despair, but her eyes became abnormally firm. Chapter 676. Tang Jing stared intently at the complex hand seals in her hand. Initially, when she used ninjutsu, she used hand seals, and the same when she used swordsmanship. He gradually realized that this was probably a trigger mechanism of ninjutsu, which could only be used by hand seals. However, this was completely different from the emperor's younger brother he had seen before, as well as the grandmaster martial artist from a few days ago. They didn't need these complicated hand seals to use ninjutsu, and they could use it anytime and anywhere. In fact, it was not difficult to understand, and he soon figured out the reason. Perhaps Junko's cultivation was not high enough, so she couldn't use ninjutsu at will. She had to rely on these handprints to do so. His guess was right. There was a big difference between ninjutsu and Huaxiao's magic. Because ninjutsu was only the tip of the iceberg, and many of the core things were not learned. But island nation people were not stupid. After generations of research, they finally found another way to remedy this problem. And that was hand seals. These complicated hand seals were created and passed down by generations of ninjutsu masters. Before a ninja breaks through to the grandmaster level, they must rely on these complicated hand seals to perform ninjutsu. Therefore, for an ordinary ninja, the speed of hand seals is directly related to the strength of their attack power and attack power. Junko was obviously one of the best among them. Her slender fingers flew, and the hand seals were completed. Seeing that she was about to fall into Tang Jing's palm, she stretched out her hand and collided with Tang Jing's hand. She staggered and fell to the ground. Tang Jing's foot moved, and he approached her. His hand was like a dragon claw, reaching for her head. Suddenly, she shouted, "Escape!" A strange scene appeared. She actually disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, as if she had never appeared before. Marshall and Li Xiaotian were surprised to see this scene. They originally looked down on the island nation's ninjutsu, but now it seems that they were just frogs in a well. Ninjutsu had many praiseworthy points. Wasn't this scene the best proof? Tang Jing's face turned cold, and said, "Is it another illusion? Let's see where you can hide." Tang Jing urged his Jin Qi and crazily circulated it. He sensed the fluctuation in the air. Gradually, his brows wrinkled. Ha! There was no fluctuation. Did she really disappear? How was this possible? How could it disappear so quickly? Even Tang Jing's earth shrinking technique was unable to do so. Strange. She had called out the escape just now. Could this be the legendary escape technique? Tang Jing had heard of this technique from the heaven monk before. In fact, the shrinking earth into an inch was the embryonic form of this escape technique, but the escape technique was even more mystical and its speed was even faster than the shrinking earth into an inch. However, escape techniques required a certain medium. They were divided into earth escape, golden shield, water escape, and wood escape. This time, Junko used the earth escape. Using the soil on the ground as a medium, she escaped in an instant. I was too careless, I didn't think that she would know ninjutsu. I really underestimated ninjutsu. Tang Jing blamed himself. Since Junko had escaped, it was impossible to find her. No wonder she was fearless and dared to come to see him alone. Last time, she was careless and did not even have the time to use her escape technique before she was stopped by Tang Jing. This time, she learned to be smart and escaped when the situation was not right. Now that she's gone, where am I going to find her? I don't have the emperor as a hostage. They won't tell me where those people are being held. Tang Jing regretted. He was full of confidence, but he didn't expect that the enemy's cunning was beyond his expectation. Now he was at his wit's end. However, his eyelids suddenly twitched. He turned his eyes and looked not far away. Ha! There was a slight fluctuation in the air. There was someone. After he circulated his true qi, his perception would become extremely sharp. Even the slightest movement in the wind would not be able to escape his perception. Junko didn't escape. Tang Zhang was overjoyed. His figure flashed and rushed in that direction. Whoosh! A person leaped out from the corner and dashed in the opposite direction like an arrow fired from a bow. It's not Junko. You want to escape? No way. Tang Jing didn't see the other's appearance, but this kind of skill was definitely not simple. How could he let the other escape? With a leap, he flew over the other's head and steadily landed on the ground, blocking the other's path. Looking closely, he cried out in surprise, "It's you." Li Xiaotian had to stop. She forced a smile and said, "Tang Jing, we meet again." When enemies meet, their eyes would turn red. Tang Jing no longer had the slightest bit of pity for Li Xiaotian. A few days ago, he had almost died in her hands. If he continued to be merciful to her, then his brain would be fried. So, Tang Jing mercilessly attacked. Li Xiaotian didn't resist and quickly fell into Tang Zhang's hands. "You're not afraid that I'll kill you? You still have the guts to come here?" Tang Jing murderously said. Wu also angrily glared and bluntly said, "It's useless to talk to her. She has a glib tongue. Don't be fooled by her." Tang Jing also had the same intention. This two-faced woman's mouth was like a lotus flower. If he didn't pay attention, he would fall into her trap. It was best not to waste his saliva with her. Seeing Tang Zhang's killing intent, Li Xiaotian's face slightly changed. She couldn't wait to say, "Don't you want to find Junko?" Tang Jing stopped his movements and lifted her in front of him. Their eyes met and they could even feel each other's breathing. "What did you say?" "Say it again." "I said, don't you want to find Junko?" Li Xiaotian calmly said. "Do you know where she is?" "Of course she is at the Imperial Tutor's mansion." "In other words, you know where the Imperial Tutor's mansion is?" Tang Jing asked. Even the National Security Bureau Suing Tian didn't know where the Imperial Tutor's mansion was. This meant that the Li Palace's intelligence was more powerful than the National Security Bureau. Li Xiaotian confidently smiled and said, "Otherwise, where do you think I have been all this time?" "You actually went to the Imperial Tutor's mansion." "Humph, your Li Palace really colluded with the island nation people." In the past, the island nation people killed many Huaxia compatriots. "You actually colluded with these people. This is simply deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors. You betrayed the entire nation and people." Tang Jing powerfully accused. He was really too angry. There was a kind of anger burning in his heart. No wonder, even though Huaxia's economy had developed, there were still many countries in the world that looked down on the Huaxia. There was a kind of colluding traitor. No wonder people looked down on them. Li Xiaotian heard this and his smile froze. He embarrassedly said, "You must have misunderstood. How could our Li Palace collude with the island nation people?" "Humph, just now Junko clearly said that the information about the island was given to them by your Li Palace. Using their hands to destroy your opponents, this is really a good move." Tang Zheng sarcastically said. Even if the palace master did this, she must have her own intentions. You don't understand her intentions and casually guessed. This is an extremely irresponsible way of doing things. Li Xiaotian retorted. Tang Zheng coldly snorted and disdainfully said, "If you dare to do it, then you must dare to admit it. Being so fussy, the Li Palace is nothing more than this." Li Xiaotian wanted to refute, but he had no choice but to swallow his words. It was futile for her to explain any further, because what Tang Zheng said was the truth. "Tang Zheng, don't listen to her. Her mouth is full of lies. Killing her is the best solution," Marshall urged. She had always been brooding over the matter of Li Xiaotian's scheming to frame Tang Zheng. She simply thought that what she said was nonsense, a lie made up in order to survive. Li Xiaotian's gaze turned, stared at Marshall, and said, "Haha, do you want to kill me that much? You must know that our Li Palace and the Marshall sect have been in cahoots for many years." Marshall remained unmoved and coldly said, "I am no longer a member of the Marshall sect. It's useless for you to reminisce with me." "Yeah, it's useless." As expected, none of the people who came out of the Marshall sect were ordinary people. "However, my life is in Tang Zheng's hands and not yours, so you can't make the decision." "You..." Marshall was speechless. Tang Zheng frowned, waved his hand and said, "Marshall, we can't kill her for the time being. In order to find the whereabouts of the Imperial Advisor's mansion, in order to save those people, her life must be preserved for the time being. There's no need. Don't you want to know the information in her mind? Just use the soul-searching technique, and no secrets can be hidden." Hiss. When Tang Zheng heard this, he sucked in a breath of cold air. A woman against a woman, it was indeed the most brutal. "Li Xiaotian, listen carefully, tell me the whereabouts of the Imperial Advisor's mansion now, otherwise, when I use the soul-searching technique, not only will your secrets be exposed, you will also become a fool because of this, and will no longer be able to stir up trouble. You really are ruthless." Li Xiaotian glared hatefully at Marshall, wishing that he could swallow her whole. "Since you understand, then tell me the truth," Tang Zheng urged. If I were you, I wouldn't believe this silly woman's words. She's tall and strong, but her brain isn't working well. You can get the information by killing me, but how are you going to enter the Imperial Advisor's mansion?" Li Xiaotian smiled coldly and asked in ridicule. "What do you mean by that?" Tang Zheng asked. "The Imperial Advisor's mansion is not that easy to enter, and it is even more difficult to see the Imperial Advisor. It is impossible for ordinary people, but my identity is special, and I can freely enter and leave the Imperial Advisor's mansion. So, if I die, then I won't be able to bring you there," Li Xiaotian said tirelessly. Although Tang Zheng still had his doubts, he already believed her for the most part. The Imperial Advisor's mansion was so mysterious, there must be a lot of soldiers guarding it. If Li Xiaotian could bring them in, then everything would be much easier. However, the key was whether or not her words could be trusted. The last time Tang Zheng believed her, he was almost killed. If he were to enter the tiger's den again, it would not be so easy. "Tang Zheng, don't believe her. She's a cunning woman. Let's find another way," Marshall anxiously advised. This answer is actually very simple. If you want to save someone, then you have to leave me alive. Otherwise, let me die together with those people." Li Xiaotian pretended to be carefree and said. Chapter 677. Seeing that Tang Jing had promised to believe in Li Xiaotian, Wu wanted to say something but hesitated. Actually, she was also very conflicted in her heart. On one hand, she desperately wanted to save them, so she had to choose to believe in Li Xiaotian. On the other hand, her intuition and experience told her that Li Xiaotian was full of lies and she could not easily believe her. However, Tang Jing had already made his decision, so she put those words back into her stomach. Li Xiaotian secretly heaved a sigh of relief, and glanced at Wu complacently. Wu Quan pretended not to see it, his gaze turned, sweeping across the Sky Emperor's corpse on the ground, and asked with a frown, "What should we do?" Tang Jing looked at the stiff Sky Emperor and sighed regretfully. The people from the Imperial Tutor's mansion were truly ruthless, even daring to kill the Sky Emperor, who knew what kind of medicine they were selling in their gourd. A dead person no longer had any value. Tang Jing waved his hand and said, "Let's go, there's no need to bother with him." However, with the death of the Sky Emperor, the chaos in the island nation will definitely worsen. Let's just sit back and watch the show. Li Xiaotian looked at the Sky Emperor's corpse absent-mindedly, his brows knitted, as though he was thinking about something. Seeing that, Tang Jing subconsciously stopped in his tracks and asked, "What are you thinking about?" As if waking up from a dream, Li Xiaotian revealed a brilliant smile and said, "Nothing." However, there was still a lingering doubt in the depths of his eyes. The three of them left the scene, leaving behind the Sky Emperor's corpse lying quietly on the ground. The final destination of the ruler of a country was incomparably desolate. The three of them disguised themselves and passed through the crowd. Looking at the parade on the street, the corner of Tang Jing's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Although his trip to the island nation this time was filled with danger, he had also gained a lot. He had actually turned the island nation upside down, which could be considered a lesson for this country. Suddenly, a commotion came from the crowd in front of him. Immediately, everyone swarmed towards that direction. What's going on? The three of them looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. Why don't we go take a look? Li Xiaotian suggested. Wu immediately rejected, "No, don't think that we don't know what you're thinking. You want to take advantage of the chaos to escape, right? In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, we will continue to advance towards the Imperial Advisor's residence." Tang Jing considered for a moment and was about to nod in agreement when he heard a voice coming from afar. This voice is so familiar. He pricked up his ears and looked up. In the distance, he saw a familiar figure speaking passionately in front of a microphone on a huge electronic screen. Damn it! Tang Jing was flabbergasted as he cursed loudly. Wu and Li Xiaotian's reactions were similar as they stared straight at the person on the screen. Isn't the Emperor dead? Why is he speaking on the screen? What is going on? Looking at the excited reaction of the island nation people, it was clear that this was not a video, but a real person speaking. Especially the mess behind him in the Kokyo, it was clear that he was standing in front of the Kokyo and speaking live. In other words, this was not a video, but a live broadcast. But dozens of minutes ago, they had seen the Emperor die in the hands of Junko with their own eyes. Tang Jing had personally checked, and could be 100% sure that he was dead. What the hell, wasn't this the situation? Although they couldn't understand what the other party was saying, it was obvious that after hearing his speech, the emotions of the island nation people gradually calmed down, and even cheered thunderously. The Emperor was a spiritual symbol of the island nation. Previously, it was rumored that the Emperor had been captured, and the authorities had always been perfunctory, so the people of the island nation were completely flustered, causing a series of riots. At this moment, after hearing the Emperor's speech, he accused the rumors of being a conspiracy of the enemy forces, telling the people not to believe it. Li Xiaotian had been staring at the Emperor on the screen. Suddenly, she raised her eyebrows and exclaimed in realization, "I know." "What do you know?" Tang Jing and Wu immediately turned their heads to look at her. "I know what's going on." No wonder Junko would kill that person without mercy, because that person is not the real emperor. Li Xiaotian said solemnly. Ah. Tang Zhang and Wu were shocked, they didn't understand what she meant. We've all been deceived. The island nation people are too cunning, they actually pushed out a substitute to block the wind and rain and confuse everyone. Li Xiaotian said hatefully. She had always been the one to lie to others, when had she ever been deceived like this? But this time, she was careless, and was actually deceived by a group of island nation people for so long, playing in circles. She was truly furious. Tang Zhang and Wu were not idiots. After thinking about it, they went through all the clues that had led to this. Gradually, they realized that what Li Xiaotian said was probably true. They had really been played by the island nation people. No. Not only them, the people of the island nation, and even the people of the entire world had been played by the island nation people. It turned out that the island nation had always nurtured a substitute for the emperor, and when necessary, they would push it out as a scapegoat. The imperial tutor's mansion was clearly aware of this, which was why they killed the scapegoat without hesitation. I was saying that the emperor's body had a hidden illness, how could it be as if nothing had happened? So he was just a fake, the real emperor was the person on the screen. Li Xiaotian pointed at the screen and said fiercely. Tang Jing once again looked over. Although the emperor's words were sonorous and powerful, as if he was full of spirit, in Tang Zheng's eyes, his spirit was all faked. How could the illness between his brows escape Tang Zheng's fiery eyes? He is the real emperor, he is really sick. Tang Zheng said, so the person I've been capturing is a substitute, damn it. But why did the real emperor not come out a while ago, allowing the country to be in turmoil, but now he came out again? Wu asked suspiciously. Li Xiaotian laughed coldly and joked, your head is too simple, you can't even figure out such a simple question. Wu's face turned cold as he said, say that again. Tang Jing hurriedly dissuaded him and explained, this is the cunning part of the other party. They know very well that we don't know that we caught an imposter. If the real emperor were to appear, then we would know. Although it's a fake, it's still hard to distinguish between the real emperor and the fake. It's the same for us and for others. If we knew the truth, we could still use the fake in our hands. We could casually broadcast it all over the world and make him admit that he is the real emperor. Then, the dignity of the royal family would be gone. In fact, they would be afraid that we would kill the fake in front of the people. That would be the real deal. Even if they were to push out the real emperor, the people would not completely believe them. In short, only when the fake is confirmed to be dead will the real emperor dare to come out and refute the rumors. The imperial advisor's mansion really played a good hand. They used the news of Wu Junshan and the others to deceive us, and then took the opportunity to kill the emperor, completely destroying the card in our hands. They really put in a lot of effort. Tang Jing spoke tirelessly, causing Wu to come to a realization. He gradually understood the mystery behind it and couldn't help but sigh at the cunning of the island nation people. Li Xiaotian, haven't you always been in cahoots with the people of the island nation? Don't tell me you don't know about the matter of the monk. Tang Jing asked. Li Xiaotian smiled bitterly, this must be the top secret of the island nation, do you think I would know? Then does that mean that the other information that Junko said is also fake? Master and the others are not in the hands of the imperial advisor's mansion. Wu exclaimed. Tang Zheng's face darkened as he fell into deep thought. To be honest, he was truly unable to determine this point. The imperial advisor's mansion's tricks were too powerful. He was unable to accurately determine which sentence was true and which sentence was false. Li Xiaotian smiled mysteriously and said, that might not be the case. The imperial advisor personally admitted that he imprisoned Wu Junshan and the others. Really? Tang Zheng was skeptical. I know you don't believe me. As for whether you believe me or not this time, it all depends on you. Li Xiaotian shrugged and said indifferently. Tang Zhang and Wu looked at each other and communicated with their eyes. Wu took a deep breath and said, "Trust her again." Tang Zhang nodded. Li Xiaotian laughed, "Smart, if you don't believe me, then there's no need to go to the Imperial Advisor's mansion." "Humph, since that's the case, then continue leading the way." The three of them continued forward. After passing through the bustling city, they realized that the gathered people had gradually dispersed. All of them had satisfied smiles on their faces. The appearance of the Heavenly Emperor had truly appeased these people. Wu said unwillingly, "Let's go back and get the Heavenly Emperor's corpse. Then, we'll expose it to the public. I wonder if it will cause a bit of a stir." Tang Jing shook his head. "It's useless, not to mention that the impostor's corpse is definitely long gone. Even if we find it, it's useless. A dead person is not as useful as a living person. This time we've been tricked by the other party. We must be more careful in the future." After saying that, he subconsciously raised his head to look at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian felt his gaze, but remained calm and composed as he walked in front alone. "Li Xiaotian, you have a cooperation with the Imperial Advisor's mansion, and now you are bringing us to the Imperial Advisor's mansion. Aren't you afraid that the Imperial Advisor's mansion will turn hostile and deal with you instead?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. "In any case, I am not on the same path as the Imperial Advisor's mansion. Are you afraid that they will fall out with me?" Li Xiaotian said indifferently. "What kind of place is the Imperial Advisor's mansion? If you go, you will definitely be disappointed, because the Imperial Advisor's mansion is just a small village. It is like a paradise without any outsiders to disturb it. This is a place that many ancient scholars yearn for." However, Tang Jing frowned and said, "A beautiful appearance often means danger. The more beautiful it is, the more deceptive it is." "Hee, are you hinting at me?" Li Xiaotian covered his mouth and chuckled, "I'll take it as a compliment. This is the most beautiful compliment I've ever heard." "Shameless!" Wu complained indignantly. Li Xiaotian turned a deaf ear to him and continued, "Although the Imperial Advisor's mansion is quiet and beautiful, there are dangers hidden within. This is without a doubt, so if you barge in, you must be prepared to sacrifice yourselves. You don't have to worry about it. Just lead the way." Chapter 678. Tang Zhang and Marshall hurriedly looked over. There was chaos in front of them and a thick fog shrouded them, making it impossible to see the path ahead clearly. "Something strange," Duan Yen said. Tang Zhang looked at Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian smiled mysteriously and said, "Of course not anyone can enter the Imperial Tutor's mansion. I am a guest of the Imperial Tutor's mansion, so of course I have the authority." After he finished speaking, he took out a token and pressed it against the whirlpool. The thick fog began to fluctuate violently, and not long after, a small path appeared beneath his feet. "Do you dare to go in?" Li Xiaotian laughed mischievously. Tang Jing did not say a word and took the lead to walk in with large strides. In fact, this was just a trick, a type of illusion technique. To Tang Jing, it was not unfamiliar, and it was not that amazing. The key was that Tang Jing could not predict what kind of danger lay behind the fog. But now that things had come to this, he had no way out. Even if it was a dragon's lair or a tiger's den, he still had to barge in. Marshall followed without hesitation. The corner of Li Xiaotian's mouth hooked up into a meaningful smile, and followed behind the two of them. Not long after, the thick fog gradually dissipated, and the scene in front of them suddenly opened up. A quiet village appeared in front of them. Small bridges, flowing water, green grass, shady trees, blue sky, and white clouds, it was as if they had traveled to an ancient paradise. There was no hustle and bustle of modern society, making people feel relaxed and happy. "This is the Imperial Tutor's mansion?" Tang Zhang and Marshall asked in astonishment. Welcome to the Imperial Tutor's mansion, Li Xiaotian said with a smile. Looking at the sparse houses, Tang Zheng became extremely alert and asked, "Where is the Imperial Tutor?" Li Xiaotian pointed to the deepest part of the village and said, "That small wooden house." Tang Zheng suppressed the emotions in his heart and walked over. Marshall and Li Xiaotian also quickly followed. Li Xiaotian rolled his eyes with suspicion and thought, "Why is it so quiet all around? There's not even a sound, and there's not even a shadow." She still remembered the various disciples of the Imperial Preceptor's mansion a few days ago, but today, these people seemed to have evaporated into thin air. Something must be wrong when things are out of the ordinary. However, Li Xiaotian didn't say anything. He just silently followed Tang Zheng, ready to go. The cabin was not far away, and it did not take long for the three of them to arrive in front of it. Tang Zheng subconsciously stopped in his tracks. Circulating his Jinqi, Zhang Xian focused his mind and held his breath. His perception increased rapidly. Ha! Someone. A strong breathing sound entered his ears clearly. "Be careful, there's someone," Tang Zheng warned in a low voice. Creak. As soon as he finished speaking, the wooden door was pushed open and a person walked out leisurely. The pupils of the three shrunk as they stared at this person. It was actually Junko, who had used an escape technique to escape. Junko's face had a playful expression as she swept a glance at the three of them and said, "Your speed is really fast. You found this place so quickly." With that, she coldly snorted and changed the topic. She stared at Li Xiaotian and meaningfully said, "You've really sold out our Imperial Preceptor's mansion." Li Xiaotian remained unmoved as he looked at Junko with a frown and remained silent. Junko slightly turned her head and stared at Tang Zheng and said, "Are you really not afraid of death? Are those people that important to you?" Tang Zheng coldly said, "Your scheme is very powerful. I actually watched as the Emperor's substitute died in your hands. But do you think this is the end? Your thinking is too simple. Oh, do you think you can find out the whereabouts of those people by coming here? This is the Imperial Preceptor's mansion, not the Imperial Palace. Do you think you can do whatever you want here?" Junko disagreed as she jokingly said, "Even if I know that this is a dragon's pool and tiger's den, I still have to barge in. Now you won't use an escape technique to escape, right?" Junko's gaze was somewhat strange as she said, "You actually recognize my escape technique. You are indeed a powerful cultivator like the information stated. Since you know this, then hurry up and hand over those people." Marshall took a step forward and said, "If you don't hand them over, then I'll burn your Imperial Preceptor's mansion to ruins just like the Imperial Palace." Creak. As if it heard the word fire, Xiaobai came out from Tang Zheng's backpack and stood on his shoulder. Junko's pupils shrank as she asked, "What kind of animal is this?" Tang Zheng remained unmoved and said, "Don't talk so much nonsense. Hurry up and hand them over." "I don't have anyone. But since you've delivered yourself to my door, of course you can't leave. Miss Li, I really have to thank you for leading them here," Junko said with a smile. Li Xiaotian's heart trembled as he suddenly realized, "So you knew that I was following you. You deliberately let me follow you and then led them here. Hee, if it wasn't for you, how could they obediently enter the trap? This time it's really all thanks to you," Junko said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You." Li Xiaotian flew into a rage. He was actually used as a gun and he didn't even know about it. This kind of situation had always been done by him to others. When had others ever done it to him? He was extremely angry, but he forcefully suppressed his anger. He only stared at Junko like a tiger watching its prey. "If you want to keep me, then you have to have the ability to do so." Tang Zheng was alarmed. It turned out that all of this was a trap set by the other party. The Imperial Preceptor's mansion scheme was linked to one another. It was hard to guard against. Even someone as meticulous as Li Xiaotian was not able to see through it. But at this juncture, he couldn't care less about whether or not it was a trap. Since he was in danger, he should make the first move to gain the upper hand. Thus, before he finished speaking, Tang Zheng had already made the first move. With a schwa sound, the war soul sword pierced towards the opponent's chest. Now that he was killing an enemy, he didn't show any mercy. The war soul sword's brilliant might caused people's hearts to tremble in fear. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew out from the wooden house. Bang! The gust of wind struck the war soul sword and Tang Zheng's attack collapsed. He staggered back a step and looked at the dim wooden house in shock. Who? This person actually escaped his perception. When he circulated his energy to sense again, he still found that the wooden house was empty. However, it was clear that there was an expert hidden inside. Could it be the legendary Imperial Preceptor? Tang Zheng and Marshall looked at each other, both of them guessing this point. The Imperial Preceptor was one of the most mysterious people in the island nation. He was also one of the most powerful people. Such an expert was actually living in seclusion in such a small wooden house. Moreover, before he even saw Lu Shan's true face, Tang Zheng was already intimidated by the other party's casual counterattack. This person's strength is definitely something I've never seen before in my life. Tang Zheng came to a conclusion. This Imperial Preceptor was undoubtedly an expert of the Grand Master realm. As for what level of Grand Master he was, it was still impossible to determine. However, Tang Zheng understood that if he was alone, he would definitely not be his match. However, with the four symbols venerable by his side, he was much more confident. He took a step forward and said, "Hiding your head and showing your tail, don't you dare to come out and see me?" Junko mocked, "Who do you think you are? Is the Imperial Preceptor someone you can meet just because you want to? Is that so? Then I'll tear down your little hut and see how you're going to hide." Tang Zheng held on to the war soul sword with both hands and growled, "Return to origin." He immediately used the fifth move of the heaven-flying immortal, return to origin. This was already the pinnacle of the heaven-flying immortal sword technique that he cultivated. In the blink of an eye, the war soul sword became ordinary and fell towards the small wooden hut. Clang! A clear and melodious sound came out from the small wooden hut, as if a sword had been unsheathed. Tang Zheng's expression turned cold, but his return to origin sword move was not affected in the slightest. Whiz! With a sound of breaking through the air, a cold light shot out and struck the war soul sword. Clang! An intense spark flew in all directions, and the war soul sword could no longer fall any further. Taking a closer look, what flew over was actually a sword, but the sword was already covered in dust and was dim. However, when facing the war soul sword, it was not at a disadvantage at all, and steadily stopped it. Tang Zheng's eyes bulged, he took a deep breath and changed his sword move, the powerful and heavy heaven-flying immortal's fourth move, Heaven Falls Earth Rends was unleashed. Clang! The war soul sword fiercely slashed onto the nameless sword, causing it to tremble and fall to the ground with a pod sound. Tang Zheng was shaken, the terrifying force that came from the nameless sword was truly not to be underestimated. Let's see what other tricks you have up your sleeve. Tang Zheng once again used his great sword, determined to destroy the small wooden hut. But just as he raised the war soul sword, 3 piercing sounds resounded through the clouds, and 3 cold beams of light flew over. Damn, why are there so many swords? Tang Zheng thought that the sword just now was the other party's sword, but it was obvious that he was wrong. The 3 arrows that flew over were all different. There were long swords, short swords, and heavy swords. It was impossible for a person to use so many swords. However, the lethality of these 3 swords was extremely terrifying. Left, middle, right, 3 directions firmly locked onto Tang Zheng, leaving him with nowhere to dodge. Tang Zheng's expression was solemn, the war soul's sword let out a clear sword cry, buzzing and trembling, as if it was excited to meet an expert. Break! Tang Jing roared, and in the blink of an eye, he attacked 3 times. Wind rising, cloud surging, sword breaking thousand caddies, lightning sparks flint. 3 heaven-flying immortals sword technique, 3 completely different offensive sword moves, yet they were perfectly fused together. Ding ding dang dang. Sparks flew in all directions, the 3 different swords were all knocked down, but Tang Jing also staggered back, his arms trembling, and the war soul's sword almost fell out of his hands. Junko's face changed. She thought to herself, Tang Jing is indeed powerful, to be able to receive 2 moves of the Imperial Master's 4 swords, but he did not suffer much damage. But so what? It was still impossible for him to be a match for the Imperial Master. Junko was extremely confident. She stood at the door and looked at Tang Jing in ridicule. Tang Jing's face turned pale white. Wu immediately asked in a low voice, "How is it?" "The enemy is tricky, be careful later." Tang Jing warned, and then patted Xiao Bai's head. "Xiao Bai, act according to the situation later, protect Wu well." A gentle light flashed across Wu Wu's eyes. The words of rejection were about to come out of his mouth, but he swallowed them back down. Li Xiaotian looked at the wooden hut with a complicated expression, not knowing what would happen next. Tang Jing took another step forward, preparing to launch another attack. No matter how powerful the opponent was, for the sake of the whereabouts of Wu Junshan and the rest, he had to give it his all. Chapter 679. You want to destroy this old man's hut? This is the dream of many people. However, these people often turn into skeletons in the end, leaving behind only their swords that are buried in my sword tomb. The Imperial advisor's voice was neither fast nor slow, but every syllable was extremely powerful, like a heavy hammer striking one's heart. Sword tomb. Tang Jing's heart moved. He looked over, and sure enough, there was a huge pit in the dimly lit room, and there were many swords stuck in it. Could it be that those swords just now flew out from the sword tomb? The so-called sword tomb, as the name implied, was the tomb of the sword. According to the Imperial advisor, these swords were all left behind by the people who challenged him after they died, so they were called sword tomb. Not only were these swords buried, it was also equivalent to burying their original owners. He could vaguely tell that there were over 100 swords in the sword tomb, which meant that there were over 100 people with superb swordsmanship who came to challenge him, and in the end, they all lost their lives. After going through hundreds of battles, it should be nothing more than this. Tang Jing sighed. So what if it's the sword tomb? What's buried are all dead things, how can it bury people? Tang Jing said with a resounding voice. Then I'll let you die here. Let's see if you can still boast so shamelessly. The Imperial advisor said coldly. Just as his voice disappeared, the sword in the sword tomb started to buzz and tremble, as if it had a life of its own. Tang Jing's face changed. He kept the war soul sword and switched to using the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows. When Li Xiaotian saw the 2 divine armaments, his eyes immediately erupted with a blazing light. He wished that he could immediately snatch them over and take them for himself. Clang clang clang. The sharp swords soared into the air and flew out from the sword tomb. They floated in the air as an invisible force controlled them. So. The sharp swords changed their direction and aimed at Tang Jing. The sound of them tearing through the air was like 10,000 arrows shooting towards Tang Jing at the same time. Whang! The bowstring vibrated, and the shooting sun arrow at the tip of his finger left his hand. Boom! Ka-cha! The shooting sun arrows hit the sharp swords, and the sound of breaking rang out one after another. The first few swords broke into pieces and fell to the ground. However, the attack of the shooting sun arrows dissipated because of these swords, and they fell to the ground with a clatter. Tang Jing was shocked. Last time in the Kokyo, so many people from the island nation were unable to block the shooting sun arrows. But this time, a single sword was able to wear down the shooting sun arrows. This was enough to show how powerful and domineering the imperial tutor's attack was. The attacks of the other swords did not slow down at all, and they continued to fly towards him at lightning speed. Tang Jing didn't have time to feel sorry for the shooting sun arrow on the ground. He continuously pulled the bowstring and released 2 shooting sun arrows at the same time to meet the overwhelming sharp swords. Boom! 2 loud noises were heard, followed by another cracking sound. Tang Jing did not have the time to appreciate his own battle achievements as he pulled Wu and quickly moved to the side. The sound of something tearing through the air brushed past their ears, and a few cold lights flew past them. If they were still standing there, their bodies would definitely be pierced through. Without a doubt, the result of this attack was already very clear. Tang Jing had used 3 shooting sun arrows, and although he had destroyed dozens of his opponent's sharp swords, the imperial tutor still controlled the remaining sharp swords and almost killed him. The difference in strength was obvious. Even though Tang Jing had the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrows, he was still unable to gain the upper hand. This imperial tutor is at least at the 6th level of the Grandmaster stage. Tang Jing guessed with his own experience. For a small country to be able to cultivate to such a level, he could already be considered to have reached the peak. It could also be seen how astonishing his talent was. Meeting such a genius, and a veteran genius at that, Tang Jing's pressure increased exponentially. Only now did he understand why the imperial tutor was so calm and confident. Because the other party did have the ability. Looking at the shooting sun arrows that had fallen to the ground not far away, Tang Jing was in pain. If this thing fell into the hands of the other party, it would be a huge loss. As if they had a tacit understanding, Xiao Bai jumped down from Tang Jing's shoulder and turned into a white light as it rushed into the house. "Humph, you little thing, do you still dare to come and die?" The imperial tutor did not take it seriously at all and said with a murderous aura. The broken sword fragments on the ground rose into the air and turned into specks of cold light, shooting towards Xiao Bai from all directions, as if they wanted to turn it into a hedgehog. Xiao Bai's eyes flashed with a red light as it squeaked and opened its mouth. Boom! Flames soared into the sky, and the broken sword fragments in all directions were completely enveloped by the flames. They fell to the ground one after another, and some even melted into a pool of molten iron. The flames spread in all directions and quickly ignited the wooden walls. The small house immediately turned into a sea of fire. The imperial tutor and Junko obviously did not expect this situation. Junko was stunned, and only the raging flames were left in her eyes. The imperial preceptor let out an angry roar. A figure soared into the sky from the flames, and then landed heavily on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. The small wooden house had turned into a sea of fire, and the sword tomb in the center of the sea of fire had also turned into a mess. A white light rushed out of the flames and fell on Tang Jing's head, and there were 3 shooting sun arrows in its mouth. Tang Jing patted Xiao Bai's head approvingly, and under Li Xiaoyan's reluctant gaze, he put away the shooting sun arrows. Then, he looked up and saw a short old man at the edge of the sea of fire. It was the imperial tutor. He didn't look like a grandmaster at all. Instead, he looked like an ordinary old man. He had a thin body and white hair. Even his back was a little stooped, which made his already small body look even smaller and weaker. If they met such a person on the road, many people would even curl their lips in disdain and stay away from him. No one would regard him as a master of a generation. But at this moment, in front of experts like Tang Jing, the lethality contained in this thin body made them not dare to underestimate him. They even felt a little scared. The imperial tutor's eyes were very small, almost narrowed into slits. He stared straight at Tang Jing and Xiao Bai on his shoulder. What kind of demonic beast is this? It can breathe fire and destroy my sword tomb. Tang Jing patted Xiao Bai's head, looked at the imperial tutor, and said jokingly, "Didn't you always want to be a coward?" Now that your turtle shell has been burned, I want to see how you'll hide your head and show your tail." The imperial tutor was unable to restrain his anger. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets, but his eyes suddenly turned and he revealed a mysterious smile. "Tang Jing, your empty words are useless. So what if my sword tomb is destroyed? With you, I don't need this bluffing sword tomb." The imperial tutor's words caused Tang Zhang's expression to change. He asked, "What do you mean?" Li Xiaotian had already guessed the imperial tutor's intentions. He suddenly realized, "So you use me as bait to lure them here for Tang Zhang?" "For me?" Tang Zhang was confused. For a moment, he couldn't figure out what he had that was worth coveting. The imperial tutor's cultivation was truly very high, far surpassing Tang Zhang's. What could he possibly want? The imperial tutor glanced at Li Xiaotian and sighed, "The holy maiden of the Li Palace truly has an outstanding mind. You've so quickly guessed my intentions. Tang Zhang, do you still not understand your own value?" Tang Zhang had already faintly guessed a few things. He speculated, the island nation's ninjutsu is only half-baked. It was born from Hua Xiao's magic. Could it be that you've taken a fancy to my identity as a cultivator and want to dig out the secrets of magic from me? As expected of an outstanding youth. As expected, you're not an idiot. You've guessed correctly. You're more valuable than anyone else here. Because you're a cultivator, you've systematically learned magic. The island nation's ninjutsu, with the support of the essence of these magic, will rapidly rise, develop, and become even more powerful. The imperial tutor didn't hide anything and admitted without restraint. Tang Zhang's heart jumped. He actually guessed correctly. This imperial tutor really had a good plan. His plan was so far-sighted that it was unexpected. Just like what the imperial tutor had said, if the island nation's ninjutsu had the essence of Hua Xiao's magic, then there would definitely be a qualitative leap. For such a nation, if they were given the opportunity to increase their strength, then their self-confidence would also increase. In the end, they would definitely bully the weak and even start a war. This was the nature of this nation. Dogs can't change their habit of eating shit. Even if you catch me, I won't reveal half a word to you. Tang Zhang said resolutely. The imperial tutor didn't mind. He faintly smiled and said, "You don't need to speak. I have my own ways to know the information in your mind." Tang Zhang was shocked. He immediately remembered the soul-searching technique. This kind of magic wasn't too difficult. There were also many mysterious ninjutsu techniques. Perhaps there was a similar magic to the soul-searching technique. Therefore, as long as Tang Zhang fell into the hands of the imperial tutor, no matter how tight his mouth was, it would be useless. Tang Zhang fiercely stared at the imperial tutor. Looking at the confidence between his eyebrows, Tang Zhang gnashed his teeth in hatred. The opponent's plan was too accurate. One step after another, inviting him to fall into the trap. Tang Zhang unconsciously fell into the trap. "Miss Li, when you go back this time, please pass on my gratitude to your palace master. Without you, it would be impossible for me to capture Tang Zhang and complete the great plan that I have dreamed of for so many years." The state preceptor said happily, as if victory was already in his grasp. Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Zhang with a complicated expression. She couldn't help but feel a sense of powerlessness. She had always thought that her plan was flawless. This time, the island nation suffered a fatal Waterloo. The older, the wiser. In front of the state preceptor, this old ginger, her scheme seemed a little too immature. "Li Xiaotian, you also didn't think that there would be such a result, right? Let me tell you, if he really captured me and let him know the secret of Hua Xiao's magic and then combined it with ninjutsu, do you think that your martial arts will be a match for his ninjutsu? At that time, when you kill all the cultivators, that will be the time for the island nation to make a comeback." Tang Zhang said jokingly. Li Xiaotian's face was very ugly. She slowly said, I also didn't think that it would turn out like this. She was a little regretful. She was very clear about the ambition of the island nation. There was a huge deviation in the mission that the palace master gave her. She didn't know if the palace master knew the current situation. Chapter 680. At this point, there was no turning back. No matter how much Li Xiaotian regretted, it was useless as he hung his head dejectedly as if he was grieving for his parents. Tang Zheng had already secretly circulated his innate qi and warned Marshall in a low voice, Wait a moment, I will delay the imperial teacher, you escape first. Marshall remained unmoved as she stared straight at the imperial advisor. With a shout, she had already rushed out first. Tang Zheng fiercely stomped his foot. Marshall was good at everything, but she was often impulsive and rushed forward. Wasn't it precisely these qualities that separated her from Li Xiaotian? Both of them were important members of the mysterious organization, but Marshall's straightforwardness was completely different from Li Xiaotian's craftiness. This caused Tang Zheng to unknowingly have a good impression of Marshall and gradually develop hatred towards Li Xiaotian. Marshall rushed forward and closed in on the imperial teacher in the blink of an eye, but the imperial teacher did not even put her in his eyes. How dare you! A graceful figure blocked in front of the imperial teacher as Junko stared at Marshall with a frosty expression. She extended her arm and the autumn water sword was already swinging with sword chi as it pierced towards Marshall. Marshall waved her hand and the roaring flame blade brought forth a string of raging flames. The air surged as she fought fiercely with Junko. The imperial teacher passed by the two and walked straight towards Tang Zheng. He smiled and said, Don't make any unnecessary resistance, the one who will suffer will be you. If you are willing to submit to me, I can let bygones be bygones. In the future, you will be able to reach a position above millions of people. This is something that many people dream of. Above millions of people, I'm afraid that I will be below you. Tang Zheng sneered. Of course, everyone will be restricted, and you are no exception. However, this is already a supreme power. The imperial teacher said as if it was a matter of course. You really have an extraordinarily big ambition. Tang Zheng sighed as his guess was not wrong. The imperial teacher had the ambition of a wolf, and was probably no different from those who started the war. The people of the island nation indeed had wild ambitions hidden in their hearts. Once they had the chance, they would unreservedly reveal them. Thank you for the compliment. This is the long-cherished wish of the island nation's ancestors. Of course, I have the obligation and responsibility to help them achieve it. The imperial tutor said proudly. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth, unable to refute. With a thought, he shouted, Then we'll talk about it after you pass this test. Boom! The gigantic body of the four symbols venerable immediately appeared. Both of its feet landed on the ground, causing the ground to tremble incessantly. Even the nearby stream splashed up. The imperial advisor raised his head to look at the four symbols' lords. His face was slightly astonished as he exclaimed, Is this the giant that wreaked havoc in the imperial palace? Even missiles can't hurt it. It's really extraordinary. After pausing for a moment, greed flooded the Grand Preceptor's eyes. He stared at the four symbols venerable with scorching light and said, Hua Xiao really does have a deep heritage. Even you have the fortune to obtain something so powerful. If I can obtain it, I'll be even more powerful. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted. His opponent was really bold. He was actually thinking about the four symbols venerable again. You'll have to have the ability to do so first. Tang Zheng said coldly. The four symbols venerable was his greatest reliance. He had faced many Grandmaster level experts and was able to escape unscathed all because of the four symbols venerable. However, he could clearly sense that the four symbols venerable was not in its best condition after summoning it this time. A few days ago in the Imperial Palace, the four symbols venerable was hit by missiles. Even Tang Zheng vomited blood. The four symbols venerable was damaged. Later on, Tang Zheng was unable to find a way to completely repair the four symbols venerable, which led to the current sequelae. He had originally planned to properly repair the four symbols venerable after returning to the country. He did not expect to have to use it again so soon. Would the damaged four symbols venerable be able to withstand the imperial advisor? Tang Zheng had no idea. This battle was the most uneasy he had ever been in so many battles. Not only did it concern his personal survival, but it also concerned the lives of martial artists, Wu Junshan, and the others. The weight of the responsibility on his shoulders was unprecedentedly heavy. It was so heavy that he could barely breathe. The imperial advisor was not intimidated by the four symbols venerable. He strode over and said, "Then let me see its battle prowess." Evidently, he was exceptionally confident in his own strength. Tang Zheng jumped onto the four symbols venerable without a word and disappeared into its chest. Xiao Bai also jumped onto the four symbols venerable's shoulder. It bared its teeth at the imperial advisor, its battle intent soaring. The imperial advisor stood with his hands behind his back. He tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and shot into the air, charging straight at the four symbols venerable. The four symbols venerable dodged nimbly. However, it was too big in the end and could not evade in time. The imperial advisor's foot landed on its chest. Boom! Tang Zheng felt as if an earthquake had struck. He was on the verge of collapsing as a sharp ringing sound in his ears almost tore his eardrums apart. Even though Tang Zheng had expected this, he was still shocked by the might of a single attack. He only cultivated a half-baked ninjutsu. How could he have such power? Tang Zheng was indignant. However, he also understood that it was definitely because the other party's talent was too great. He must be a genius of all kinds. Tang Zheng was not wrong. Everyone in the imperial advisor's residence was very talented. They were all outstanding figures who far surpassed ordinary people. They were geniuses elected by the entire nation. The imperial advisor was a genius among geniuses. It was not hard to imagine how powerful they were. It could be said that Hua Xia was lacking in this aspect. There were many sects, each of them fighting openly and covertly. The internal friction was too severe. Island Nation had few people and land, but it could not stop the other party's internal and external unity. They used the entire nation's power to cultivate talents. Naturally, their results were extraordinary. Tang Zheng did not have time to sigh because the imperial advisor rushed up again. This time, he did not use the tip of his foot, but his finger aimed at the venerable four symbols' chest. The imperial advisor was very smart. He did not attack the other parts of the venerable four symbols. He understood that the venerable four symbols' body was impenetrable, so he deliberately chose the chest. This was where Tang Zheng had disappeared. The door in the chest was definitely the venerable four symbols' life gate. His choice was correct. When Tang Zheng saw the rapidly approaching finger, he subconsciously placed his fists in front of his chest. Boom! The finger touched the venerable four symbols' fist. A puff of green smoke rose. A white spot was left on the fist as if it had been burned. A white spot. Tang Zheng looked at it in shock, as his heart was in turmoil. The four divine beasts had fought with him so many times, but no matter if it was swords, blades, guns, or even missiles, none of them were able to leave a single mark on the four divine beasts. But this time, he had miscalculated. The imperial advisor's seemingly light finger actually left a white spot. It was completely possible to imagine the destructive power contained in that finger. So large and so nimble. What a great treasure. The imperial advisor's thoughts became more and more heated. You can block me once, but can you block me this time? He raised his arm and his expression became abnormally cold. Killing intent filled his body. Tang Zheng guarded his mind and focused all his attention. However, he did not see the imperial advisor's next move. He could not help but feel puzzled. Why was he bluffing like this? Was he trying to show off? Of course not. Li Xiaotian had also been observing the imperial advisor. From his attacks, she came to a shocking conclusion. The imperial advisor's strength was not inferior to Li Palace's palace master, Granny Li. One had to know that Li Palace was one of the three great mysterious organizations. The other clans could not compare. As the master of Li Palace, Granny Li's strength was obvious. However, this bullshit imperial advisor of a small country was actually not inferior to Granny Li. This was too shocking. No wonder he said so confidently that he could deal with Wu Junshan and the others. Looks like he was not lying. But isn't there Lan Yu by Wu Junshan's side? Her cultivation is not inferior to Wu Junshan's. Could it be that the two of them together are still not his match? Li Xiaotian could almost hear the sound of her heart beating because this guess was too shocking. If the imperial advisor was really so powerful, then he could directly kill his way to Huaxia. No one could stop him because he was practically invincible. No, I must be mistaken somewhere. Li Xiaotian hurriedly shook her head, denying this absurd idea. If he was really so powerful, why would he be so obsessed with Tang Zheng's technique? Therefore, there must be some secret behind this that she did not know. However, if he was not so powerful, then how could Wu Junshan and the others fall into his hands? Li Xiaotian felt a headache coming on. Even someone as smart as her could not figure it out. Pang! Suddenly, a loud sound interrupted her thoughts and pulled her back to the real world. She subconsciously turned her head to look. The battle between Junko and Marshall had already reached its climax. Junko had the autumn water sword, which was obviously a treasure sword, causing Junko to be like a tiger that had grown wings. Marshall's roaring flame blade was also very powerful, but after all, it was a pair of hands. Compared to ordinary swords, it was not at a disadvantage. However, in front of the autumn water sword, they would suffer a loss after a long battle. Therefore, Marshall gradually retreated, feeling that it was difficult for him to hold on alone. Li Xiaotian's expression was very ugly. Although she did not get along with Marshall, they were both from Huaxia. Being bullied by an island nation girl like this, she found it difficult to calm down. However, she did not lend a helping hand. The current situation was too delicate. Tang Zheng and Marshall were both at a disadvantage. If she joined the battle, it would be useless. Instead, she would put herself in a dangerous situation. Li Xiaotian was an absolutely calm person. Before doing anything, she had to weigh the pros and cons, hoping to maximize her benefits and reduce the danger. At this moment, it was obviously not a wise decision to lend a helping hand. Suddenly, a trace of splendor appeared in her eyes. She looked at Marshall in disbelief and muttered to herself, "How can this be? What kind of martial arts is this?" At this moment, Marshall had already undergone a huge change. She had already stopped retreating. Her palms flew up as if they had turned into flames. This is definitely not the roaring flame blade. The roaring flame blade is not like this. Li Xiaotian's mouth twitched as she could not help but exclaim. She could clearly feel the power contained within the palms. It was not something the roaring flame blade could compare to. The key point was that she had never heard of such a martial arts technique. This meant that it was not a martial arts technique. Then where did she learn it from? Li Xiaotian's heart was in a mess. Chapter 681. Dark Flame Divine Palm, the martial arts manual that Tang Zheng took out from the first floor of Langya Pavilion. Back then, he took out a total of 2 things from the first floor of Langya Pavilion. In addition to this martial arts manual, there was also a mysterious box. Wu Zui had been immersed in practicing the Inferno Divine Palm for some time now, but she had never used it properly. At this moment, the roaring flame saber was no longer enough to deal with Junko, so she had no choice but to use the dark flame divine palm. The dark flame divine palm and the roaring flame saber had something in common. They both cultivated the inner strength to become more overbearing. However, the dark flame divine palm was clearly superior. This was the understanding that Wu had since she started cultivating. It was precisely because the dark flame divine palm was too overbearing that it was especially difficult to cultivate. Although she had been cultivating for so long, she had not completely grasped the essence of the dark flame divine palm. At this point, she could not care so much. She circulated the dark flame divine palm's mental cultivation method and her palms immediately turned fiery red as if they had turned into flames. The surrounding air rippled as if it was producing dense qi. Junko's face was cold as she stared at this scene. She knew that the opponent had changed their martial arts. Although they had not exchanged blows yet, she could already tell that this martial arts manual was extraordinary. Junko was not afraid. After all, their cultivation levels were similar. Of course, even if they changed their martial arts, how powerful could it be? The autumn water sword swung through the air and with a sharp sound, it pierced towards Wu. Wu's cheeks also turned crimson. Her entire body seemed to be burning as she pushed her palms forward. Waves of heat rolled as if an invisible flame was gushing out from her palms, wanting to burn everything in the world. Bang! Her palms once again slapped the autumn water sword. The autumn water sword immediately turned fiery red as if it had been melted by the high temperature. Ah! Junko could not help but let out a scream. Her palms felt as if they were on fire and she subconsciously wanted to let go. However, her firm willpower stopped this stupid instinctive impulse. She hurriedly retreated while circulating her inner strength to counteract the heat in her palms. Seeing that the opponent retreated after one strike, without any of the previous aggressiveness, Wu's spirit was greatly aroused. With a low roar, she pounced forward like a fierce tiger descending the mountain. Li Xiaotian was dumbstruck at this scene and muttered to himself, how can she be so powerful? Yes, even with her experience, it was hard to imagine that Wu could turn the situation around in the blink of an eye and completely suppress Junko. If it was her, she would definitely not be able to do this. She stared at Marshall's palm with burning eyes and said, everything is strange because of the martial arts she cultivates. Who gave her this set of martial arts? Suddenly, her heart moved, and her eyes turned, locking onto Tang Zheng. Could it be him? He was 100% sure that the martial sect did not have this set of techniques, so with the experience and connections of the martial sect, only Tang Zheng could do this. Isn't he a cultivator? Shouldn't he be holding spells and cultivation manuals? How can he martial arts manual? She was puzzled. Of course, she did not expect that the dragon seal on Tang Zheng's forehead could directly reach a treasure trove like Langya Pavilion. Li Xiaotian could not help but feel a trace of jealousy. Back then, she had been in contact with Tang Zheng for more days than Wu. Furthermore, they had gone through trials and tribulations together in the 10,000 mountains. If she did not become enemies with him because of his identity as a cultivator, then wouldn't this martial arts manual be hers? At that moment, she was a little jealous of Wu. How could Wu have such good luck? She came from behind and obtained such a huge benefit. She had mixed feelings, but she quickly threw these emotions out of her mind. That was because the battle between Tang Zheng and the imperial tutor had undergone a drastic change. The imperial tutor raised his arm even higher. Tang Zheng had not figured out the other party's intentions, but Li Xiaotian had already seen some clues. She looked at the stream behind the imperial tutor in shock. The stream seemed to be controlled by a terrifying force and had already stopped flowing. Crash! The stream suddenly soared into the air, turning into droplets of water. The droplets passed by the imperial tutor and shot straight towards the four symbols venerable. The water droplets condensed into lines that were like thousands of sharp swords. Thousands of swords shot out at the same time, slashing towards the four symbols venerable. The four symbols venerable's huge body had nowhere to hide. Tang Jing also instantly realized the other party's intentions. Too powerful, he actually managed to draw the stream's water into swords. The four symbols venerable hurriedly placed one hand in front of his chest to protect himself. His other hand clenched into a fist and punched out. The air crackled like a sudden clap of thunder as a shockwave was sent forward. Boom! 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 The shockwave struck the water swords, which immediately turned into droplets of water that scattered down. However, there were still some water swords that slipped through the net and ruthlessly slashed at the four symbols venerables' chest and arm. Sword after sword. The huge force caused the four symbols venerable to almost lose his balance. His huge body was on the verge of collapse. Tang Jing could clearly sense the rumbling coming from the four symbols venerable's chest. It was like a sledgehammer had struck his arm, but it was also clearly transmitted through his arm to his chest. Heh, you can block it once, but can you block it a second time or a third time? Doesn't your Hua Xia have a saying that dripping water penetrates a stone? Today, I can test this saying, the imperial tutor proudly said, a faint and savage smile appearing on his face. Dripping water penetrates a stone. Tang Jing was shaken. Wasn't the imperial tutor planning to use the soft to conquer the hard? Dripping water penetrates a stone was not a legend. If the imperial tutor was allowed to continue his attacks, it was unknown whether this seemingly invulnerable four symbols venerable would be able to endure. Li Xiaotian had clearly seen this point, and her eyes grew more and more complicated. At this moment, Tang Zhang's defeat was of no benefit to her. The imperial tutor was clearly more ambitious than Tang Jing, and also more skilled at scheming. If the imperial tutor grew stronger, it would definitely do more harm than good to Hua Xia and the Li Palace. Previously, she had been prepared to remain uninvolved, but the appearance of the Inferno Divine Palm made her realize that Tang Jing was a massive treasure trove. If it fell into the imperial tutor's hands for nothing, it would be letting the imperial tutor own this treasure trove, which would be letting him off too easily. Lend a hand to Tang Jing. A voice emerged from the bottom of her heart. But she did not rashly attack. The imperial tutor was too powerful, and with her meager abilities, the slightest carelessness would result in her being beheaded. She did not believe that at this crucial moment, the imperial tutor would care about her status as the holy maiden of the Li Palace. She stared at the battle, searching for an opportunity to strike. The four symbols venerable had already become a drowned rat. Its entire body was soaked, and even Xiaobai on its shoulder was soaked. It fiercely shook its thin and small body, sending droplets of water into the air. It grinned and let out a long squeak. Tang Jing knew that it was truly enraged, so he shouted, "Xiaobai, attack!" In order to break the imperial tutor's attempt to break through the stone with dripping water, he could only use Xiaobai as an elite force. Xiaobai obeyed, and its squeak suddenly became sharp and resounding. It raised its head and expanded its chest, its small mouth raised high. Its eyes turned fiery red, and the droplets of water on its body instantly evaporated. Boom! A fireball was spat out of its small mouth. However, this fireball did not rapidly fly forward. Instead, it floated in front of the four symbols venerable, constantly spinning as it absorbed the surrounding air. Gradually, the fireball began to grow at a visible rate. Fiery red replaced the color in front of it, and as far as the eye could see, everything was fiery red. When the water sword struck this ball of fire, they immediately evaporated into water vapor, finding it difficult to harm the four symbols venerable in the slightest. The imperial tutor's expression flickered at this sight, and he angrily said, "A little brat wants to influence the battle? Die!" Swoosh! Thousands of water swords suddenly condensed into a line, forming a gigantic water sword. With the stream as the source, it slashed at the fireball. Squeak! Whitey raised its neck and cried out loudly. Its snow-white fur immediately underwent an earth-shattering change, completely turning into a fiery red color. It was as if it had turned into a ball of fire. Boom! The water sword slashed at the fireball. Sparks and water splattered in all directions, overflowing with light and color. It was extremely beautiful. However, this beauty contained an earth-shattering danger. It was evident from the surrounding vegetation that was hit by the water droplets and sparks. The vegetation looked as if it had been shot by a machine gun, and was in a complete mess. If a person was hit, the outcome would not be much better. The Imperial Tutor's expression was a little strange. He suddenly pointed his finger forward, and the stream water bubbled and boiled, quickly adding into the water sword. The fireball was sent flying backwards, almost crashing into the body of the four symbols venerable. Immediately, the Imperial Tutor revealed a smug look and said, "Now you know what it means to be a mantis trying to stop a chariot, right?" Xiao Bai ignored the Imperial Tutor's mockery. It yelled and leaped off the four symbols venerable's shoulder, crashing straight into the ball of fire. Xiao Bai! Tang Jing turned pale with fright and could not help but cry out. He had never seen Xiao Bai use this move as if he was facing a great enemy. He did not know what this move meant, or if there was any danger. Seeing Xiao Bai being engulfed by the flames, Tang Jing was also enraged. He roared at the top of his lungs, "I'll fight it out with you." He took a deep breath, and true qi began to circulate wildly in his veins. In an instant, the air around his body began to vibrate, and his bones began to crackle. His hair and beard stood on end, and he looked like a mad lion. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at the Imperial Tutor. Kachak! Tang Jing clenched his fists so tightly that his fingernails almost sank into his flesh. At the same time, the four symbols venerable also clenched his fists and stomped his feet on the ground. The stone slabs on the ground immediately cracked and shattered into pieces. Kill! Tang Jing roared furiously. The four symbols venerable's huge body was like a cannonball that had been fired, charging straight at the Imperial Tutor. The four symbols knight passed through the fireball and the water sword and charged directly at the Imperial Tutor's body. Two huge fists were like two meteors flying from outer space. They whistled through the air and smashed directly at the Imperial Tutor's head. The Imperial Tutor's expression changed drastically. He could deal with Tang Jing with ease because he was fully focused on attacking. At the moment, he was fully focused on the water sword, but he dared not underestimate Tang Jing's frenzied attacks. Chapter 682. The four symbols venerable rushed in front of the state preceptor. The state preceptor crossed his hands, and a broken sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Yes, he was holding a broken sword in his hand. As if facing a great enemy, he frowned. He raised the broken sword in his hand high and casually slashed at the four symbols venerable. Boom! The water sword exploded and was turned into water vapor by the fireball, disappearing without a trace. The ball of flame trembled and fell to the ground. The flame was extinguished, revealing Xiao Bai's thin body. Its fur turned snow-white again, and the spirit in its eyes had clearly weakened. It looked at the back of the four symbols venerable and grinned, as if saying that it had done its best. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the four symbols venerable's huge fist had already reached the state preceptor's head. The powerful pressure caused the ground to cave in, and the state preceptor fell into the pit, drowning his short figure. Clang! Suddenly, the broken sword rose from the pit and collided with the huge fist. The soil around the pit immediately flew out as if it had been affected by a huge shockwave. Tang Jing clenched his teeth and pressed his fist down a little, completely sealing the top of the pit and burying the state preceptor in it. State preceptor. Seeing this, Junko let out a heart-wrenching scream, and her movements involuntarily slowed by half a beat. She had been forced to retreat step by Wu, and was surrounded by dangers. Now that her movements were half a beat slower, Wu immediately seized this rare opportunity. Bang! The Inferno Underworld palm imprinted on Junko's chest, and she flew back like a kite with a broken string. She crashed into the stream, splashing water droplets all over the sky. Wu took advantage of the opportunity to give her a fatal blow, but when she caught up to Junko, she saw her fingers moving, forming a complicated hand seal. Junko revealed a strange smile to Wu, and in the next second, she disappeared. Escape technique. Wu fiercely stomped her foot. She was still a step too late. Junko had this strange escape technique, so it was easier said than done to kill her. She hurriedly turned her head to look in the direction of Tang Jing. The guardian of four symbols' giant fist had already sealed off the crater. There was no movement in the crater, as if the Grand Preceptor had been suffocated to death. What's going on? Tang Jing frowned and carefully moved the four symbols' venerable's fist away. Ha! The crater was empty, not even a shadow could be seen. Shit! Tang Zhang's heart skipped a beat, and he cursed in his heart. The Imperial Preceptor had also used the Earth Escape technique, and it was obvious that he had long escaped from the huge pit. But he definitely wouldn't run away. This was his headquarters. Tang Zhang suddenly had an ominous premonition and subconsciously turned his head to look. His pupils involuntarily widened as he screamed, "Wu, be careful behind you." Wu Jingran was shocked, and slapped backwards with his palm. The Fire Underworld Divine Palm was more than enough to deal with Junko, but after all, Wu Jingran had not cultivated the Fire Underworld Divine Palm to the peak. Therefore, this seemingly tyrannical palm did not cause any waves, and was easily dissolved by the Imperial Preceptor behind him. The Imperial Preceptor had used the Earth Escape technique to escape behind Wu Jingran, and then took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. How could Wu Jingran be his opponent? Wu Jingran fell into the Imperial Preceptor's palm, and the broken sword was placed on her neck, forming a sharp contrast with her white and tender skin. The Imperial Preceptor's head popped out from behind Wu Jingran, and he clicked his tongue and said, "Tang Jing, you are really powerful, far beyond my expectations. Whether it is you, this huge monster, or that little guy, you have all broadened my horizons." Imperial Preceptor, what are you doing? Tang Zhang was unable to restrain his anger as he asked. Hey, don't you know what I want to do? If you obediently surrender, then I will let her go. Otherwise, I will let you watch her die. In any case, she is of no use to me. If I kill her, then kill her. It is not a pity at all. The Imperial Advisor said with a murderous aura, as if the broken sword in his hand could cut Wu's throat at any time. You. Tang Zhang was flustered and exasperated, but he was speechless. This was a battlefield, cruel, and the slightest mistake would cause the situation to take a turn for the worse. However, in the end, Tang Zhang did not expect that the Imperial Preceptor, a Grand Master of a generation, would actually use someone else to threaten Tang Zhang. This was not the bearing of a Grand Master of a generation. Obviously, the Imperial Preceptor was a person who was guided by his goals. As long as he could achieve his goals, the process and methods were not important. I will count to 3. If you don't come out from there, I will immediately kill her in front of you. The Imperial Preceptor threatened. Without a doubt, he was not bluffing, so Tang Jing did not dare to be careless and immediately shouted, "No, I'll come out. Don't worry about me." Wu shouted loudly. "Be good, you can't die." Tang Jing advised. "If you come out, both of us will die. But I can't watch you die without doing anything. Then I'll die immediately. You don't have to be threatened anymore," Marshall said resolutely. Then, with a tilt of his neck, he slashed towards the broken sword. Are you courting death? It's not that easy." The Imperial Preceptor tapped on Marshall's body and her acupoints were immediately sealed. She could no longer move and could not even commit suicide. Marshall could not help but reveal a look of despair as he roared with a heart-wrenching voice, "If you have the guts, then kill me. Hee, if Tang Jing doesn't do as I say, I will definitely kill you without hesitation." The imperial preceptor said with a smile, "I'll start counting. 1. As soon as this number came out, Tang Jing immediately jumped out of the four symbols venerable's body and shouted, "Don't kill her, I'm out." When he jumped down from the four symbols venerable, he immediately put him into the sumra pouch. Seeing that, the imperial preceptor's eyes immediately burned with passion. He sized up Tang Jing from head to toe like a monster looking at Tang Seng's meat, wishing that he could immediately pounce on him and eat him. "Why are you doing this? For me, it's not worth it." Marshall's emotions were extremely complicated. He was both regretful and moved. If he did not drag him down, then Tang Jing would not have been threatened. At this moment, she hated herself to the core. She had never hated herself so much before. She was too useless and would only drag him down. Why didn't she just die? Tang Jing forced a smile. "How could I just watch you die? What's so scary about death? At most, I'll accompany you." Marshall's emotions rose and fell. His eyes became moist, and he really had the urge to cry. In this world, other than master and mistress, no one had ever treated her so well. They didn't even care about their own lives for her. "If I have a next life, I'll still be your woman." She silently made up her mind in her heart. In this life, she had already decided to follow Tang Jing, and that was to be his woman. Even though this was a promise she had made to Tang Jing. But at this moment, her heart had completely melted. She was truly devoted to him. Not only in this life, but also in the next life, she wanted to chase after him and be his woman. Marshall didn't know much about love, but there was one thing she understood very well. If a person was willing to risk his life for her, then she would be willing to follow him wholeheartedly. All of this was so simple. There weren't so many reasons, nor were there so many grand things about love. Simple, direct, straightforward. When Li Xiaotian saw this scene, she couldn't help but feel a little jealous of Marshall. Her thoughts were even more meticulous than Marshall, but she also understood how difficult it was for a man to sacrifice his life for a woman. This kind of thing was almost extinct. But Wu's luck was too good. He had met someone like Tang Jing just like that. She was a little annoyed and felt that she was a little pitiful. She had schemed and schemed everywhere, but in the end, what she got was far less than a careless and foolish woman like Wu. "No, I want more. If others have it, I want it too. If others don't have it, I want it too." Li Xiaotian silently clenched his fists. "Ha, it's truly moving. You're actually willing to give up your life for her." The imperial advisor laughed in surprise and said disdainfully, "Is this the love that you young people are talking about? Love is just a superfluous thing. It will only make people emotional and turn them into fools. In the end, the one who will suffer is themselves." Tang Jing didn't know if this was love, but one thing was certain. For her, Marshall did not hesitate to take the risk and forcefully charge into the imperial palace to save him. At the same time, he could do the same. Was this love? He didn't care what it was. What he wanted to do was to find every opportunity to save Marshall from the imperial advisor's hands. Wu Mingliang blinked her eyes. The word love made her heart beat violently. She couldn't help but ask herself, was this really love? Love, what an ethereal thing. She had never hoped for it, nor even thought about it. She stared straight at Tang Jing, as if she wanted to discern the answer from his face. But Tang Jing didn't have the mood to think about this. He walked towards the imperial advisor with large strides, but in the end, he stopped a few meters away. The imperial advisor frowned and scolded, "What are you stopping for? Do you want her to die?" Tang Jing remained unmoved and said resolutely, "I know what you want the most." He pointed to his own head. "You want the knowledge in my mind, but if I die immediately, do you think you have a way to take these things out of a dead person's head?" "What do you mean?" The imperial advisor had a bad premonition and hurriedly asked. Tang Jing revealed a brilliant smile. His two neat rows of snow-white teeth were extremely beautiful, giving Marshall a dazzling feeling, causing his heart to palpitate. Although I can't control you, I can control myself. If I were to commit suicide immediately, would you still be able to get what you want? The state preceptor's eyes suddenly widened as he shouted, "Stop." Obviously, he didn't expect Tang Jing to be so ruthless to him and even dare to kill him. This was a trait that almost no one possessed. Whether or not you stop depends on you. Tang Jing's smile was still clean and bright, like sunlight shining into the bottom of Marshall's heart. Her heart seemed to melt as tears welled up in her eyes. Ever since she was young, she had never shed tears for a man. In fact, she had never shed tears at all. No matter how difficult the situation was, she would grit her teeth and endure it. Chapter 683. The imperial tutor had already guessed Tang Jing's intentions and said, "You want me to let her go?" "Smart." Tang Jing praised. "But if I let her go, wouldn't you regain your freedom?" The imperial tutor said unwillingly. Tang Jing smiled but did not say anything. It was obvious that he had the imperial tutor in his grasp. The state preceptor's small eyes narrowed into slits as he stared at Tang Jing, his eyeballs rolling around in circles. Suddenly, he said in a clear voice, "All right, I promise you, let her go." Tang Jing was overjoyed. The move that he came up with in a hurry was indeed effective. But before he could be happy, he heard the imperial tutor continue, "But I am not an idiot. I will let you go." "What do you mean?" Tang Jing's eyelids twitched. The imperial tutor's eyes flashed with a hint of sternness as he grabbed Wu's neck with his 5 fingers. She had no choice but to open her mouth and a pill was immediately sent into her mouth. Tang Jing turned pale with fright and said, "What did you feed her?" "I don't trust you, so of course I have to leave a backup plan." The imperial tutor said sternly, "She ate the heart-devouring pill. If there is no antidote, her heart will be devoured and she will die from bleeding from her 7 orifices." Tang Jing's face was ashen as he gritted his teeth and said, "You are too ruthless." "Hee, thank you for the compliment. However, as long as you obediently tell me what I want, she will not die. I will give her the antidote." Tang Jing's anger surged out. The imperial tutor was indeed an old fox. He was actually able to counter every move and grab onto Tang Jing's life. "Don't use your life to threaten me. If you still want to play tricks, I won't take the things in your mind. According to my information, you are not the only cultivator in Huaxia. The cultivators are already gradually rising. It won't be too difficult for me to find someone to replace you." Tang Jing already had no way out. "All right, then let her go first. I'll go over and let you do whatever you want with me." Tang Jing walked towards the state preceptor again. The state preceptor unsealed Wu's acupoints and smiled as he released his hand and said, "Sure." Wu regained his freedom, his eyes filled with tears. He kept shaking his head and said, "No, why are you so stupid? I am not worth your life." Tang Jing took 2 steps forward and arrived in front of Wu, pulling her over. Wu threw himself into her embrace and sobbed, "I won't allow you to go over. Don't go over. My life is not worth you paying so much." Tang Jing caressed her tear-stained cheeks and revealed a brilliant smile. "Don't be silly. You have to live well and live on strong." Wu looked at him. The two of them were about the same height. Their eyes met, full of affection. She shook her head like a rattle drum and said resolutely, "Without you, can I still live in this world?" Tang Jing's face turned cold, and said, "Be good, don't let my sacrifice go to waste. You have to take good care of my grandfather in the future." This time, Tang Jing was determined to die, because this time, there would no longer be a miracle. The gap between him and the state preceptor was too great. It was like a chasm that could not be bridged. Moreover, Wu's life was in the hands of the state preceptor, so he had no room to resist. If Tian Chanzi was here, he would definitely scold him for being muddle-headed. How could he give up his life for a woman? This was too muddle-headed, too unwise. But Tang Zhang was not Tian Chanzi. He had his own principles and bottom line. If Wu could give up his life for her, then he could do the same. If you still want her to live, then don't be so wishy-washy. The state preceptor impatiently urged. Tang Zheng pushed Marshall away, causing Marshall to shake her head in pain, but seeing the determination in Tang Zheng's eyes, she understood that there was no turning back. Things had already reached this point, and the wood had already become a boat. She choked with sobs, looked into Tang Zheng's eyes, and said firmly, "I will definitely take good care of grandfather." With that, he raised his face and kissed Tang Zheng on the lips. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, it separated with a single touch. However, it was as if they had been electrocuted. Their eyes met and they could see something different in each other's eyes. The two of them had already had skin-to-skin contact, but this simple kiss contained a deep affection that far surpassed the previous intimate contact between the two of them. This was because the two of them had completely different states of mind. Tang Zheng pulled Wu back and resolutely walked towards the state preceptor. The state preceptor's face was filled with excitement as he clenched his fists tightly together. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air broke his good mood. A sharp arrow flew through the air and shot towards him. The arrow shone with a cold light, containing an extremely great power. The state preceptor recognized this arrow. Wasn't this the arrow that Tang Zheng had used earlier? But didn't Tang Zheng not make the slightest movement? Where did this arrow come from? He immediately turned his head to look in the direction of the arrow and saw a familiar person, Li Xiaotian. She was holding an iron bow and aiming it at him. The state preceptor was furious. This little girl actually dared to attack him. He had let her go because of the Li Palace, but she still had the guts to do so. The state preceptor was furious. The broken sword in his hand immediately slashed towards the sun-shooting arrow. Clang! The sun-shooting arrow shot towards the ground, unable to harm the state preceptor in the slightest. "Humph, you dare to make a fool of yourself with such insignificant skills. Even if you are the holy maiden of the Li Palace, you can forget about leaving this place today." The state preceptor roared and reached out to grab Tang Zheng. The situation had changed and he did not want the cooked duck to fly away. As long as Tang Zheng fell into his hands, even if Tang Zheng wanted to commit suicide, he would not be able to do so. Then his goal would have been achieved. But things did not go as he wished. The heavens were not helping him. Just as he reached out, the sun-shooting arrow on the ground flew up again and shot towards his chest. This unforeseen event shocked him. He had never expected that the sun-shooting arrow, which had lost its threat, would suddenly fly up again. With Li Xiaotian's cultivation, he did not have the ability to control an arrow through the air. But the facts were the best proof. There was no room for falsehood. The threat of the sun-shooting arrow shooting towards his chest multiplied, making it impossible for him to ignore it. He couldn't even raise his broken sword to block it. Retreat. He only had this one path. Thus, he retreated. With this retreat, the distance between him and Tang Zheng was once more widened. A person appeared between him and Tang Zheng like a whirlwind, grabbing Tang Zheng's hand and urgently shouting, "Let's go." This person was Li Xiaotian. Tang Zheng hesitated. Marshall's life was still in the hands of the state preceptor. If he left just like that, wouldn't Marshall not be able to live? Moreover, how could Li Xiaotian be so kind as to save him? Could it be another conspiracy? He really felt a little scared. Li Xiaotian's cunning image had already entered his heart and he did not dare to believe it so easily. Li Xiaotian only took a glance at him and saw through his thoughts. He immediately said, "I'm here to save you." I have a way to save Marshall." Hearing that, Tang Jing no longer hesitated. He turned around and ran. At the same time, he grabbed Marshall's hand. Like a headless fly, he ran away with large strides. Li Xiaotian angrily stomped his feet, cursing in his heart, "You ran faster than me, but you still foolishly sent yourself to death. What a complete idiot." She also hurriedly chased after him. The three of them ran as fast as lightning. Seeing this, the state preceptor was so angry that smoke almost came out of his 7 orifices. He shouted loudly, "Stop right there, I will kill all of you. None of you will be left alive." The three of them were not idiots, so they did not stop. Instead, they ran even faster, and the sun-shooting arrow had long since been taken back by Li Xiaotian. The state preceptor had already discovered that the tail of the sun-shooting arrow had a thin thread that was hard to see with the naked eye. That was why Li Xiaotian was able to control it from afar and catch him off guard. This is the Imperial Preceptor's mansion. There are formations set up by the Imperial Preceptors. Let's see where you can run to. The state preceptor was not in a hurry to chase after them because he believed that the thick fog could trap the three of them. They had already arrived at the narrow path that they came in from. In front of them was the thick fog. Li Xiaotian followed the pattern and pressed a command medallion into the whirlpool. Originally, the dense fog should have dissipated and an exit should have appeared. However, this time, there was no reaction at all. Tang Jing secretly cursed and said, "Your command medallion has lost its effectiveness. You guys run. In this Imperial Preceptor's mansion, without my permission, you guys won't be able to fly out even if you have wings." The state preceptor laughed sinisterly. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. At the last moment, such a situation had occurred. Could it be that the heavens wanted them to die? However, the three of them were not people who would give up so easily. Seeing that the state preceptor had caught up, the three of them turned around and rushed to the side. Continue to run. Once you're exhausted, you won't need me to do anything," the state preceptor said calmly. Whoosh whoosh, the wind whistled in their ears. The three of them did not dare to stop and rushed forward with all their might. Suddenly, a bamboo forest appeared in front of him. Tang Zhang was overjoyed. With an obstacle, he could effectively delay the state preceptor. Thus, without any hesitation, he pulled Wu's hand and took the lead to rush into the bamboo forest. When Li Xiaotian saw the bamboo forest, a thought flashed through his mind. He immediately realized where he was and subconsciously stopped in his tracks. He blurted out, "Don't go in." However, it was already too late. Tang Zhang and Wu rushed in without hesitation, completely ignoring her words. She stomped her feet hatefully and said, "A dog biting Lu Dongbin, you don't know how to appreciate kindness. I can be considered to have been killed by you guys." Turning her head to look, the state preceptor had already caught up. She did not dare to stay any longer. With a gust of wind under her feet, she also rushed into the bamboo forest. This bamboo forest was of course the sword forest that had caused her to suffer a loss. That was why she was so afraid. She was very clear that there were too many strange things in this sword forest, and this was also an important place in the state preceptor's mansion. If she were to barge in, wouldn't she be like a sheep walking into a tiger's den, walking right into a trap? However, Tang Zhang's actions made her unable to think about all of this. She chased after them as fast as lightning. Looking at the two of them holding hands, she felt that it was especially dazzling. Thus, she said snappily, "Are you guys courting death? This is the sword forest of the state preceptor's mansion. If we rush in, what if we encounter danger?" Sword forest. Tang Zhang raised his thick eyebrows. "What do you mean?" Chapter 684. Sword forest, if you barge in, you won't be able to leave. Tang Zhang subconsciously thought of the array formation outside the witch tribe in the 10,000 huge mountains. didn't it also cause people to lose their way? This is definitely a type of array formation. It's just that you're not proficient in these things, so you lost your way. Tang Zheng said solemnly. You have a way. Tang Zheng did not say too much, and said, let's take one step at a time. In any case, it's much better than facing the imperial advisor. Li Xiaotian thought about it and agreed. The imperial advisor would not let them go, although they would lose their way in the sword forest, but wasn't there still Tang Zheng? His identity as a cultivator might be able to turn danger into safety. Marshal, how are you feeling? Tang Zheng turned his head to look, but did not see any trace of the imperial advisor, so he asked with concern. I'm fine. Marshal's breathing was somewhat hurried, his face flushed red. Tang Zheng touched her forehead and said, your forehead is so hot. Li Xiaotian, didn't you say that you have the antidote? A trace of panic flashed across Li Xiaotian's eyes, and he stammered, No. What? Tang Zheng turned pale with fright. You actually lied to me again. Tang Zheng was so angry that his eyes widened. This Li Xiaotian really did not change his nature, he actually lied to him at this critical moment. Furthermore, this concerned Marshal's life. You. Tang Zheng's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He fiercely grabbed onto Li Xiaotian's collar. You want to kill you. Li Xiaotian squeezed out a smile and said jokingly, I saved you, but you want to kill me. Is this how you repay me for saving your life? You are harming Wu's life. If I don't kill you, do I have to thank you? Tang Zheng was furious. He blamed himself for being too naive to actually believe her nonsense. Li Xiaotian was not afraid and continued, do you think that if you hand yourself over to the imperial advisor, he will really give Wu the antidote? You're too naive. What kind of person is the state preceptor? How could he just watch her leave? Both of you are already on his death list. He's just trying to trick you into submission. Tang Zheng was slightly startled. He had also thought of this at that time, but for that slim chance of survival, he had to take this risk. He had no other choice. Looks like you know this as well. You're just deceiving yourself. If I hadn't deceived you, would you have obediently turned around and fled? For her, you will definitely continue to hand yourself over to the state preceptor without hesitation. At that time, both of you will be finished, and the state preceptor will be the final winner. Do you really want to see this scene? Li Xiaotian continued to chatter. Tang Zheng was speechless. If you want to kill me, then kill me. In any case, I'm not your match. However, in the future, others will say that you, Tang Zheng, are ungrateful and actually want to kill your own savior. Li Xiaotian pretended to be carefree and said. Tang Zheng's expression kept changing as he glared fiercely at Li Xiaotian. His gaze was as if he wanted to cut her into 1,000 pieces. Li Xiaotian, however, was not afraid at all. He raised his head and stared at him with a burning gaze. Tang Zheng was in a mess. He really didn't know what to do. Without the antidote, wouldn't Wu's life be in danger? If he went out and surrendered now, would he be able to exchange for the antidote? He immediately rejected this absurd idea. Forget about what the state preceptor was thinking at the beginning. With the state preceptor's personality, how could he give him the antidote? Therefore, this had already become a dead end. Suddenly, a hand was placed on Tang Zheng's arm. Marshal looked at him affectionately, shook his head, and said, Don't kill her. She did the right thing. You can't sacrifice yourself for me. Tang Zheng was about to refute when Marshal's finger pressed down on his lips and continued, Don't say it, I understand. This is fate. I accept it. After saying that, he turned to stare at Li Xiaotian and said, Although I hate you, I have to thank you this time. Thank you for helping me out just now, so that everything can still be salvaged and not slipping into an irreparable abyss. Li Xiaotian laughed, Tang Zheng, it seems that women are more reasonable than you. Tang Jing coldly snorted, and hatefully released his fingers. Li Xiaotian regained his freedom, tidied up his clothes, and said, "Let's not be in a hurry to blame who is right and who is wrong, leaving this place first is the most important thing." Tang Jing turned a deaf ear and asked Marshall gently, "Can you hold on?" "I'm fine," Marshall said quickly. Tang Jing frowned and grabbed Marshall's hand. What kind of person was Marshall? She was a pre-celestial martial artist, so the running just now definitely wouldn't cause her breathing to become so chaotic. There must be a problem. "I'm fine." Marshall wanted to break free from Tang Jing's hand, but his hand was like a vice. How could she break free? She was very clear about the situation with her body. In fact, she had already felt that something was wrong. There was a faint pain in her chest, and she was unable to breathe. This kind of situation had never happened before, so it was obvious that the heart-devouring pill had begun to take effect. The Imperial Advisor said that after the heart-devouring pill took effect, it would devour her heart, causing her to bleed to death from all 7 orifices. She was not afraid of death, but she did not want to drag Tang Jing down, nor did she want him to see her miserable death. She hoped that the image she left in Tang Jing's eyes was beautiful. "Don't move, let me check." Tang Jing channeled his innate qi, and threads of innate qi flowed along her meridians towards her body. When the innate qi reached her chest, Tang Jing couldn't help but feel a bit of heartache, because he could clearly see the scar on her chest, which was caused by the Fire King of the Dragon Group in the Northwest Desert. Not only her chest, but her hands were also injured by the flames, leaving behind scars. Tian Chanzi had once said that this kind of scar could be removed bit by bit with innate qi, but it was not a short period of time. After Marshall obtained the Fire Underworld palm, he was engrossed in cultivation and did not come to Tang Jing to remove the scar. Therefore, after delaying again and again, she still had this shocking scar on her body. Seeing the strange expression on Tang Jing's face, Wu immediately guessed what she was thinking. He subconsciously looked at his chest, as if he could see the ugly scar through his clothes. He couldn't help but feel embarrassed. As the innate qi flowed, it immediately made a new discovery. Tang Jing's heart couldn't help but tighten, as if it was being ruthlessly grabbed by someone. How could this be? Outside her heart, there was a black thing wriggling, as if it had a life of its own. It extended its tentacles and attached itself to her heart. Every time her heart beat, dark red blood would flow along those tentacles to that black thing. What the hell is this? Tang Jing turned pale with fright, as this scene was too shocking for him. What's wrong? Seeing Tang Jing's ashen face, Wu asked curiously. Tang Jing shook his head and said, "Nothing, don't move." Tang Jing could conclude that this thing was caused by the heart-devouring pill. The Imperial Advisor said that he could devour her heart, and it seemed that what he said was true. This damn thing was not just absorbing the blood from her heart bit by bit, it was not impossible for it to devour her heart in the future. That thing was alive, which made Tang Jing think of a legendary spell, the Gu Technique. The Gu Technique was a very mysterious spell. Even in the original cultivation world, very few people knew this spell, and those who were proficient in it were even rarer. Just now, the heart-devouring pill must have contained a Gu worm. When Wu consumed it, the Gu worm was awakened and attached itself to her heart. If there was no antidote, the Gu worm would completely awaken and then slowly devour Wu's heart, completely killing her. In addition, if the Gu technique was cultivated to the extreme, one could use these Gu worms to control a person's consciousness and use them as puppets. The state preceptor's heart-devouring pill obviously doesn't have the ability to control the host, but it's not difficult to kill her. Damn, the Imperial Preceptor's mansion actually has such a weird thing. It seems that ninjutsu is not completely useless. In the past, the island nation stole a lot of good things from Huaxia. Tang Jing thought indignantly. Even so, he did not intend to compromise. He was prepared to try and see if he could help her get rid of this damn thing. Hearing that, Wu's body slightly stiffened. He took a deep breath and held his breath as he looked deeply at Tang Jing. He knew that he was going to heal her. Her true qi flowed to the outside of the cluster of goo worms. Suddenly, the goo worms shook as if they were stimulated. Those tentacles quickly grew and drilled into her heart. Ah! Wu's facial muscles immediately contorted as he screamed in pain. Beads of sweat dripped down from his forehead like rain. Tang Jing was shocked and quickly asked, "Marshall, what's wrong with you?" I'm fine." Wu clenched his teeth and held on, but in an instant, he opened his mouth and let out a mournful scream. Tang Jing saw those tentacles crazily drilling into Marshall's heart, and Tang Jing's heart felt as if it had been ruthlessly stabbed by a knife. He already understood the power of this goo worm, and although his true qi was powerful, it would definitely have a harmful effect on the goo worm. It was precisely because the goo worm had sensed danger that it would counterattack without any regard for its life. If Tang Jing continued, perhaps the goo worm would die, but Wu's heart would also be devoured by the goo worm. In that case, everything would lose its meaning. Tang Jing unwillingly withdrew his innate qi. As expected, those tentacles stopped moving and did not continue to drill into Wu's heart. However, they were still greedily sucking the blood from the heart. At this moment, those tentacles had already wrapped around half of the heart, and the speed at which they absorbed the blood became even faster. Wu stopped screaming and gasped for breath. His face turned from red to pale as he asked weakly, "How is it?" Tang Jing's face was gloomy as he resolutely said, "I will definitely think of a way to cure your poison." Wu was dejected. Since he said so, then the situation was especially serious. She looked deeply at Tang Jing, squeezed out a smile, and said, "It doesn't matter. Life and death are fated. I'm not afraid." Chapter 685. Li Xiaotian looked at the two of them clasped hands and Tang Jing's resolute eyes. In a trance, she actually had an impulse to change to Marshall. However, the wolf quickly gained the upper hand. She said seriously, "If you don't leave this place, you won't be able to cure her wholeheartedly. Therefore, leaving this place is the most important thing." Tang Jing glanced at her from the corner of his eyes, supported Marshall, and walked forward. Li Xiaotian knew that his image in Tang Jing's eyes had once again fallen, so he followed without saying a word. As far as the eye could see, there were many green bamboos that pierced the sky. The three of them had already walked for a period of time, but the bamboo forest seemed to have no end. Li Xiaotian said worriedly, "The last time I encountered this situation, it was also very strange. Moreover, these bamboos are very strange. Even my arrows can't break them." Tang Jing was shocked and asked, "Really?" Li Xiaotian nodded his head heavily. Tang Jing reached out and stroked the green bamboo. It was no different from ordinary bamboo, but why was it so stubborn? Even Li Xiaotian's arrow could not harm it in the slightest. "How is it?" Li Xiaotian asked. Tang Jing did not say a word. His figure flashed and he began to wander around the bamboo forest. His fingers would occasionally tap on the green bamboo. Li Xiao 5, Tian and Marshall looked at him nervously, not knowing what the result would be. Suddenly, Tang Jing stopped in his tracks. His brows were tightly knitted as he said, "This is an array formation. Is there a way to get out?" Li Xiaotian asked anxiously. You want to go out? Once you enter the sword forest, you will be a puppet in my hands, at my mercy. You still want to go out? You must be dreaming." An arrogant laughter suddenly came from the sky. If it was not the imperial advisor, who else could it be? The three of them were shocked. Tang Jing immediately stood in front of Marshall to protect him. Li Xiaotian glanced at him and could not help but turn pale. The three of them looked up at the sky at the same time. Other than the bamboo forest, there was not a single ghost in sight. "You don't have to look for me. If I don't show myself, you won't be able to find me. The state preceptor obviously knew their actions like the back of his hand. He said proudly, "How was the taste of the poison?" "Tang Jing, this is all your fault. You killed her." "Ah. Nonsense." Marshall retorted loudly, "All of this is your scheme." "Heh, you still have the strength to refute me. You do have some perseverance. But soon, you will run out of strength. You can only lie on the ground and beg for mercy. In the end, you will bleed from your 7 orifices and die. That feeling, I am afraid I will not forget even if I become a ghost." Marshall's expression changed slightly as she faintly felt the pain in her heart increase. The goo worm was causing more and more damage to her. "Shut up." Seeing Marshall's reaction, Tang Jing flew into a rage and roared, the war soul in his hand fiercely slashed forward. Whoosh! The sword light swept across the green bamboo in front of him, causing it to immediately bend down and lie on the ground. However, it quickly bounced back and stood proudly. Seeing this scene with their own eyes, whether it was Tang Jing or Marshall, they were all in disbelief. How could these green bamboos be so strange? That sword strike just now was enough to split open stones, so why was it unable to harm these seemingly weak bamboos? Feel free to vent your anger. Let's see if you can hurt my sword forest. The state preceptor laughed sinisterly. I don't believe in this evil. Tang Jing went crazy, the war soul in his hand danced like a tiger, the sword light covered the sky and covered the earth, like an inescapable net, everywhere, slashing onto the green bamboo. In that instant, the bamboo leaves fluttered and the green bamboo bent. This small world was filled with berserk air currents, but when Tang Jing stopped, the green bamboo all bounced back, not a single one breaking. Tang Jing gasped for breath as he looked around in disbelief. This was completely beyond his imagination. What kind of ghost sword forest is this? Tang Jing roared hysterically. The state preceptor's complacent laughter came from the sky, as if he was mocking Tang Jing. Marshall's face became paler and paler, her eyes revealing a pained expression. Seeing Tang Jing like this, her heart really ached. Li Xiaotian said calmly, "The sword forest is an important place in the state preceptor's residence for people to comprehend sword techniques. Ordinary disciples do not have the qualifications to enter, only those who have cultivated to a certain level have the qualifications. Yesterday, Junko came out of the sword forest, and then her strength increased greatly. I suspect that she comprehended a new sword technique in the sword forest." Comprehending sword techniques. Tang Jing was startled, he looked around, what did these green bamboos have to do with sword techniques? I don't cultivate sword techniques, so I'm not very clear about the way of the sword, so I can't tell if this news is true or false. Li Xiaotian said regretfully. Tang Jing, on the other hand, calmed down. Didn't he train in sword techniques? Moreover, the heaven-flying immortal's sword technique was a very powerful set of sword techniques. Since Junko could comprehend sword techniques in the sword forest, why couldn't he? He calmed down the anger in his heart, and his heart calmed down bit by bit. He simply closed his eyes, circulated his innate qi, and released his senses. Suddenly, he felt a trace of strangeness. The green bamboos disappeared and were replaced by streaks of sword qi. The sword qi pierced the sky and stood proudly. An indescribable mysterious aura lingered in the sword forest. He seemed to have realized that the green bamboos were all illusions. Their true colors were streaks of sword qi. No wonder weapons were unable to harm them in the slightest, because they did not have a physical body. The green bamboos were just illusions. Who exactly thought of this method to actually condense so much sword qi? Comprehending sword techniques in this kind of environment is indeed twice the result with half the effort. Every blade of grass and tree here was compatible with the way of the sword. As long as one used their heart to sense it, coupled with a certain amount of talent and cultivation as a foundation, it would not be difficult to comprehend sword techniques. When he quietly sensed the sword chi, the innate chi in his body involuntarily sped up. The heaven-flying immortal sword technique also began to circulate on its own. He subconsciously raised the war soul sword. Swish! Sword light flashed, and the war soul sword drew a beautiful sword light in the air. Wind rising, cloud surging. Although Tang Jing still had his eyes closed, he still recognized this sword move. The innate chi quickly circulated according to the path of the heaven-flying immortal sword technique. This sword move was naturally used, completely out of his control. It was as if something had triggered the heaven-flying immortal sword technique. His heart suddenly became clear. It must be because of this sword forest. Other people could comprehend sword techniques here, but the heaven-flying immortal sword technique was too high level. He did not need to spend too much effort to comprehend it. The sword forest naturally triggered this point. Immediately, he swept away the dejection and bad luck from before and became spirited. He quietly felt the changes in his body. The heaven-flying immortals had a total of 6 moves, and each move had 36 moves. It was incomparably complicated and varied. Previously, he had only cultivated to the 5th move, return to origin. He had not even touched the threshold of the 6th move. The 6th move was the peak of this sword technique. Of course, it was not easy to cultivate. The innate chi was still circulating rapidly in his meridians, and the war soul sword in his hand still did not stop. Sword breaking 10,000 caddies. The 2nd move of the heaven-flying immortals. Next. 3rd move, lightning fire sword. 4th move, heaven falls and earth rends. 5th move, return to origin. The innate chi still did not stop. Tang Jing felt like he was a balloon. The innate chi had already filled his entire body, and was about to explode. The war soul sword was completed in one go, and these 5 moves were unleashed in an instant. Puff puff puff. The green bamboo was slashed by the sword again and again, and then it quickly returned to its original appearance. Tang Jing seemed to be still doing useless work. Wu and Li Xiaotian looked at him worriedly, but seeing that he was immersed in it, they did not say anything to disturb him. Only, the two of them clenched their hands tightly, their palms drenched in cold sweat. The imperial advisor's laughter was still deafening, continuously ridiculing Tang Jing for overestimating himself and only knowing how to do such useless work. The war soul sword danced faster and faster, the sword light intertwining, becoming denser and denser. The imperial advisor's smile gradually weakened, and in the end, it disappeared without a trace. What replaced it was a cry of alarm. "What are you doing?" Of course, Tang Jing would not answer him. He just kept on waving the war soul sword, causing the true chi in his meridians to circulate even faster. Traces of enlightenment appeared in his mind. A gust of wind suddenly blew in the sword forest. This gust of wind rose from the soles of Tang Jing's feet and soared upwards, causing the bamboo leaves to flutter and the green bamboos to sway with the wind. "Stop!" The imperial advisor roared, and a figure suddenly appeared not far away, rushing over with lightning speed. Seeing that, Wu and Li Xiaotian rushed forward at the same time. The sun-shooting arrow pierced through the air and shot straight towards the imperial advisor. Wu's palms turned fiery red, and the fire underworld palm once again displayed its might. The sword light flashed, and the broken sword in the imperial advisor's hand exploded with a resplendent light. The sun-shooting arrow flew back, and after the fire underworld god's palm struck the broken sword, the huge recoil caused her to quickly retreat. The two of them worked together but were unable to stop the imperial advisor. However, they were very clear that since the imperial advisor was so nervous, it must be because Tang Jing had gained something. They had to stop the imperial advisor from getting close to Tang Jing even if they had to risk their lives. Thus, the two of them charged forward once again. Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish. The imperial advisor roared. Ding Dang shouted, and his sword light slashed into the void at the tail of the sun-shooting arrow. The thin thread that was hard to see with the naked eye was cut off, and the sun-shooting arrow's attack decreased sharply. After being blocked by the broken sword, it flew out diagonally. Li Xiaotian leaped into the air, wanting to catch the sun-shooting arrow. This was her treasure, the divine weapon that she had obtained from Tang Jing with great difficulty. She could not lose it just like that. The imperial advisor saw through her thoughts. With a flash of sword light, the broken sword blocked her path, and even the iron bow in her hand was cut into two. Li Xiaotian immediately retreated, barely dodging the attack. Looking at the iron bow in her hand that was broken into two pieces, she could not help but reveal a look of regret. Although this iron bow could not compare to the heaven-shocking bow, it was still a rare weapon. You ate the heart-devouring pill and you're still so brave. This is truly unexpected. However, without my antidote, you won't be able to hold on for long. I won't kill you, I'll torture you to death. The imperial advisor stared at Wu and laughed sinisterly. Whoosh whoosh. The Inferno Nether Divine Palm was like a tiger as it attacked the imperial preceptor. However, the imperial preceptor did not meet force with force. Instead, he dodged to the side and sneered, "You are digging your own grave. The more you circulate, the faster the poison will take effect. I don't need to do anything, you won't be able to last long." Chapter 686. Marshall fell to the ground, her entire body twitching in pain. Her face was devoid of blood, her pupils dilated, gradually losing their color. Her consciousness was gradually blurring, the scene in front of her quickly spinning. She felt as if her heart was about to stop beating. No, her heart was about to disappear. A heart-wrenching pain. She finally knew what it was like. The imperial tutor smiled in satisfaction and said, "Now you know how powerful it is." He walked past her in large strides and headed straight for Tang Jing. Li Xiaotian clenched her teeth and secretly said, "Go all out." Her figure flashed and blocked in front of the imperial tutor. However, she was not in a hurry to make a move because she knew that she was not the imperial tutor's opponent. If she made a move, it would mean that she would lose. Her goal was to delay the imperial tutor and buy time for Tang Jing. The imperial tutor looked at Li Xiaotian with a murderous look and said, "You did not hesitate to sacrifice your life for him, is it really worth it? You are the holy maiden of Li Palace." Li Xiaotian lightly said, "Whether it is worth it or not, I am the clearest about it." Since you are so muddle-headed, then there is no need for me to persuade you. Li Palace's palace master knows that I killed you, so he can't do anything to me. Moreover, with Tang Zheng's technique, a merely palace can be turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. The imperial tutor arrogantly said. "Don't boast too early, be careful not to sprain your tongue." The imperial tutor smiled and did not comment. He raised his leg and walked towards Li Xiaotian. "Wait a minute." Li Xiaotian immediately reached out her hand to stop him. The imperial tutor subconsciously stopped and said, "What, you still have your last words?" Li Xiaotian rolled her eyes and said, "Yes." Too late. The imperial tutor did not give her the chance and directly chopped at her with the broken sword. Puff! Li Xiaotian's clothes were cut open and blood splattered out. She was injured. With just one sword, without the shooting sun arrow, she could not block one of the imperial tutor's attacks. The imperial preceptor arrogantly chased after him and said, "You are too weak. There is no challenge or sense of accomplishment in killing you." Li Xiaotian's eyes flashed with despair. This was the result of trying to be brave. If he didn't pretend to be a good person, he wouldn't have fallen to such a state. From the corner of her eyes, she glanced at Tang Jing and discovered that his eyes were still tightly shut. The war soul sword in his hand was like a tiger giving birth to wind, as fast as lightning, causing the wind in the sword forest to become even stronger. Tang Jing, I hope I've bought enough time for you, she thought in despair. She unwillingly raised her head to block, but the Imperial Preceptor's broken sword was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. She could not block it at all. As long as the broken sword fell again, her life would come to an end. Whoosh! A strand of hair on her forehead was sliced into two by the sword chi. She could even feel a burning pain on her cheeks. Creak, creak. Suddenly, a cry sounded in her ears. Then, a ball of fire brushed past her body and soared into the air, spraying towards the Imperial Preceptor. The heat wave hit him in the face. The Imperial Preceptor had no choice but to take half a step back. Li Xiaotian also hurriedly retreated, escaping from the gates of hell. Turning her head, she found that Xiao Bai was standing by her feet. He raised his little head and pouted his little mouth as he spat out fire. Li Xiaotian was overjoyed. She couldn't wait to hug Xiao Bai and kiss him. She had seen Xiao Bai's power, so she hurriedly urged, Xiao Bai, burn him to death. The Imperial Preceptor was burned by the fire and appeared to be in a sorry state. He angrily roared, little bastard, you escaped a calamity before. This time, without Tang Jing, I want to see what kind of waves you can stir up. Xiao Bai screamed again and did not retreat an inch. Die! The Imperial Preceptor shouted as the broken sword in his hand slashed down. Boom! Flames soared into the air and completely enveloped the broken sword. However, the broken sword immediately burst out a bright sword light, suppressing the flames and pressing forward. The flames retreated bit by bit. Xiao Bai's claws dug deep into the soil, resisting the impact of the broken sword with difficulty. Gradually, the look in his eyes became dim. Previously, in the battle with the water sword, he had consumed a lot of energy and had not recovered yet. But in order to protect Tang Jing, he resolutely stood out. But now, he was exhausted and had reached the end. He turned his head and glanced at Tang Jing as if to say his final farewell. Then, he clenched his teeth and let out a sharp cry. The flames suddenly exploded. The broken sword swung back. The Imperial Preceptor's arms suddenly shook and the broken sword almost flew out of his hand. He was shocked. This little guy's strength really made him look at him with new eyes. But after all, he was an expert who had experienced hundreds of battles. He understood that at this critical moment, he could not drop the ball. Thus, he endured the rebounding force from the broken sword and swung it down again. Whoosh! The air was quickly split into two halves. The sword chi fell on Xiao Bai's head. In the next second, it seemed to be split into two. Li Xiaotian saw this, but there was nothing he could do. He unwillingly shouted no, but it was useless. Clang! With a muffled sound, the broken sword bounced up and flew out of the Imperial Preceptor's hand. The Imperial Preceptor was stunned and exclaimed, how could this be? Looking carefully, he saw a huge turtle shell in front of Xiao Bai, completely covering Xiao Bai. There was a white mark on the turtle shell. Apparently, it was left by the broken sword. Although there was a white mark, the turtle shell was still intact. A small head drilled out of the turtle shell and kept blinking at Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai's big eyes were also filled with joy. He stretched out his small paw and touched Gue Qiansui's head. Although Gue Qiansui's attack power was not strong, because of its nature, its defensive ability was particularly strong. This had been proved just now. It had been hiding in Tang Zhang's backpack. Because its fighting power was not strong, it had not participated in the battle. At this moment, Tang Zhang was in danger. Gue Qiansui finally fought back. What is this? The Imperial Preceptor looked at the trembling broken sword in the mud and then looked at Gue Qiansui and exclaimed. I, Gue Qiansui, will absolutely not allow you to hurt the exalted immortal. Gue Qiansui spoke in human language and said firmly. You are a demon beast, but you actually cultivated to the level where you can speak human language. The state preceptor was startled as if he saw a ghost. Exalted immortal, who is the exalted immortal? His eyes turned and stared at Tang Zheng. He said incredulously, you actually called him an immortal. What qualifications does he have? Immortal's magical power is not something you can guess. Gue Qiansui said disdainfully. The imperial preceptor restrained his expression and said, I don't care what immortal he is. Even if he is a real immortal, I will not let him return to my sword forest. His figure flashed and he picked up his broken sword. Like a gust of wind, he swept over Gue Qiansui's head. Gue Qiansui could only sigh. It was too late to stop him. Wush Tangzheng was surrounded by a gust of wind. His eyes were still closed. In his mind, the situation of the sword forest was completely presented. He saw Wu and Li Xiaotian risking their lives to protect him. He saw Wu fall to the ground. He saw Xiao Bai and Gue Qiansui's decisive action. But he could not help them. Because he had reached the most critical moment. That trace of understanding was getting clearer and clearer. He felt that he was inextricably linked with the sword chi in the sword forest. The wind between heaven and earth was like a link between him and the sword chi, transmitting each other's information. The battle soul in his hand gradually slowed down. But he still repeated the 5 moves of flying immortals from outer sky over and over again. It was a hair-raising process. Master, the sword chi has a spirit. If you can communicate with it, the sword chi can be collected in your hand. A voice suddenly sounded in Tang Zheng's mind. He immediately remembered that it was the voice of the sword spirit. At that time, he obtained the sword spirit and the wisp of remnant soul in the snow mountain in the northeast. Moreover, with the original battle soul and the battle soul, the 3 combined and fused into a new sword spirit. However, the sword spirit had always been silent, and other than discovering that it had allowed the war soul sword to level up to a heaven-level magic treasure, it did not display any other mystical abilities, so he temporarily threw it to the back of his mind. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the sword spirit took the initiative to speak. You're saying that the sword chi has a spirit. As long as I can communicate with it, I can collect all the sword chi for my own use. Tang Zheng asked in surprise. With so many sword chi, if he could collect them all, then Tang Zheng's cultivation would definitely advance by leaps and bounds. It was completely a blessing in disguise. Yes. The sword spirit replied, I can help master. How can you help me? The sword spirit has a spirit. The sword chi also has a spirit. The 2 are connected and can be fused into one. The sword spirit said solemnly. Then hurry up and act. Tang Zheng had already seen the imperial tutor pass Gue Qiansui and Xiao Bai and fly above his head. He was condescending and slashed down with his sword. He was bound to heavily injure him. He had no time to resist. He could only place his hopes on the sword spirit. The sword spirit received the order. The battle soul's sword light shone brightly like a bright sun. A buzzing sword sound rang out as if it was speaking. Then, a strange scene appeared. Buzzing sounds immediately rose and fell from all directions. It was like an echo in response to the battle soul's sword cry. These sounds seemed to be communicating with each other. It was ringing non-stop. The imperial tutor who was in mid-air had a huge change in expression. Although he did not understand what the buzzing sound meant, he had already sensed that the aura in the sword forest had undergone an earth-shattering change. It was a change that made him afraid. A strong wind blew and the green bamboo swayed non-stop. The sound of shattering rose and fell one after another. The imperial tutor had no choice but to stop his attack. He landed on the ground and looked around. Looking at the chaotic sword forest, he shouted, "What's going on?" There was a mysterious connection between him and the sword forest. This was a special connection that all the imperial tutors of the past would cultivate. Therefore, the imperial tutor could control everything in the sword forest as he wished. But at this moment, he realized that this connection was rapidly weakening. This was unprecedented and unheard of. All the imperial tutors had never encountered such a thing. Gradually, his eyes revealed fear for the first time. It was a fear that came from the bottom of his heart.